Chapter 51. Haha, how come there are so many acquaintances? Junior brother Yu Yun, junior brother Zhu Qin, junior sister Yu Xinyao, junior sister Wen. Hey, that guy hiding behind the tree over there, he also looks familiar. What is he doing sneaking around behind the tree? Is he in a hurry? As soon as Wang Lu appeared, he greeted everyone with a smile, and finally turned his attention to the embarrassed person hiding behind the tree. However, after looking at him for a while and confirming that the other party had no intention of coming out from behind the tree, Wang Lu was too lazy to investigate further. This time he didn't come to the Heavenly Policy Hall to be someone's bosom sister. Therefore he quickly cast aside the other people and found the protagonist of this event, a certain civil servant's senior brother with a vigilant look, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Senior brother Mu Xiao, don't be so nervous, I just have some information that I need to register with you. Although the time is not quite right, as a diligent and responsible person, you shouldn't mind working overtime, right? To be honest, Mu Xiao, who was very keen on the official business of the Heavenly Policy Hall, really didn't mind working overtime, but looking at the malicious smile on Wang Lu's face, he became very concerned. Especially when he saw the stack of information Wang Lu took out, his heart skipped a beat. The information in Wang Lu's hand was the same as the one Yu Yun had just submitted. It was the experiential learning report written by the experiencer himself using the sincerity paper. It was an important evidence to judge the experiential learning results, as well as reward and punishment points. The sincerity paper was specially made by the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall, and it was enchanted with a powerful restrictive spell. The restrictive spell only had one function. When writing on the sincerity paper, no lies could be written, so as to ensure the authenticity of the words. Of course, the restrictive spell of the sincerity paper was not unbreakable, but to deceive the sincerity paper at least only Taoist Master King Pil could do it. With the cultivation level of Yu Yun and Wang Lu, the sincerity paper they submitted should not be fake. Seeing the stack of sincerity paper Wang Lu took out and the title was Experiential Learning Report, Yu Yun looked at Wang Lu in surprise and then looked at Wang Lu. Senior brother Wang Lu, you also went for experiential learning? No wonder I couldn't find you these days. You too? Yu Yun nodded. That's right, because the last experiential learning was interrupted. We plan to start again. Originally, I wanted to invite senior brother and you to come together, but I couldn't find you for a few days. Speaking of which, where did you guys go to train? With whom? Oh, of course it's the small clear sky peak. At this level, besides the small clear sky peak, where else can it go? Yu Yun was even more surprised. Senior brother is also going to the small clear sky peak? We haven't seen you guys at all. A certain crown prince also timely added, we've been training in the small clear sky peak for 6 days, but we haven't found any trace of other senior brother and junior brother. Senior brother Wang Lu, did you and junior brother Wen Bao really go to the small clear sky peak? Mu Xiao was inwardly happy, thinking, that's right, with the conduct of the master and disciple of non-phase peak, cheating on the report is a common occurrence. He said that he went to the small clear sky peak for experiential learning, but in fact he might have just wandered around the non-phase peak for a week, and then used some unknown method to deceive the sincerity paper, fabricating a legendary adventure about the collapse of the world out of thin air, and then claiming to have obtained tens of thousands of challenge points. This is very logical, and also very consistent with the usual style of the non-phase peak. In the rumor, didn't that elder King Pil often use the sincerity paper to fool the disciplinary elder? This is a criminal record. Fortunately, he met Yu Yun and the others who also went to the small clear sky peak for experiential learning, and as witnesses, they were enough to expose Wang Lu's lies. Haha, you are cunning, but you never thought that you would stumble here. However, the next moment Wang Lu very naturally replied, it's normal that you didn't see us. These past few days I basically stayed in the Azure Dragon Gorge, how could you, who are just on the periphery, see me? Azure Dragon Gorge? Yu Yun was simply amazed by Wang Lu. Senior brother, you actually went to the Azure Dragon Gorge? May I ask which senior brother led the team? Isn't this too bold? Wang Lu smiled again. I led the team. Senior brother, you led the team? Yu Yun was once again inexplicably shocked. He didn't think that senior brother Wang Lu would be so magical. With his body refining stage cultivation, he actually led the team. However, after being stunned for a long time, he suddenly realized another problem. In other words, it was only you and junior brother Wang Lu? Yes, what's wrong? What's wrong? A body refining stage cultivator and a chi cultivating stage cultivator dared to go to the small clear sky peak for experiential learning, but they actually dared to run to the Azure Dragon Gorge? If you don't seek death, you won't die? Why can't you understand? Don't be so surprised. Since you want to open the challenge mode, of course you must have the spirit of seeking death. Challenge mode? What the hell is that? Senior brother, you can just say that you're going to throw your life away. However, looking at the lively Wang Lu in front of him as well as the thick pile of reports, no matter how incredulous Yu Yun was, he had to accept the appalling conclusion. The two of them actually went to the Azure Dragon Gorge and they even came back safe and sound. How did they do it? Even if the environment of the Azure Dragon Gorge was special, as long as one mastered the method, survival would be relatively easier than the Lotus Pond and other places. But with only two newcomers, no matter how he thought about it, it was absolutely impossible. Alas, successor brother is indeed worthy of being a successor brother, always able to do what others can't. With such a bright pearl in front of them, their second experiential learning suddenly became dim. Although unexpectedly getting challenge points was a good result, but senior brother went to the Azure Dragon Gorge with just 2 people and returned safely. No matter how you looked at it, his challenge points were far higher than theirs. It's not just me, don't we have a teammate? Wang Lu said, patting the fatty beside him. Yun was slightly surprised. Wen Bao? It wasn't that he had any prejudice against Wen Bao, but from the perspective of a guide, Wen Bao, who was slow, not proficient in spells and had extreme swordsmanship, was really not an ideal experiential learning partner. His value was more reflected in. Well, Yu Yun admitted that he really couldn't think of where Wen Bao's value could be reflected. But Wang Lu was able to turn waste into treasure, and with such a useless junior brother, he completed a shocking feat. Everyone else present was also as surprised as Yu Yun. Zhu Qin and Wen Yin were stunned. They couldn't convince themselves that the slow and stupid fatty could actually complete a great challenge that far surpassed their own. And a certain teenager behind the tree clenched his fist so hard that it was bleeding. After 2 years in the sect, Wang Zhong was very clear that Wen Bao was a waste that couldn't be cultivated. Because Wen Bao was born with an earthly spirit root, the sect actually invested more in him than Zhu Qin and Wang Zhong. But after 2 years he was the most useless one. Several of the senior brothers secretly sighed that the sect had made a mistake and let a waste in. However, in just 1 month this waste had completed a shocking reversal. It was Wang Lu, and only Wang Lu could miraculously turn waste into treasure. Wang Zhong didn't think that Wang Lu would bring a useless waste to complete the challenge. Wen Bao must have played a great role in the process, and if he could make a useless waste play a role, wouldn't that be turning waste into treasure? Now that he thought about it, Wang Lu seemed to be good at turning waste into treasure. 2 years ago, it was also because he followed him that a mountain village errand boy could become a genius disciple of the Lingjian school. Thinking of this, Wang Zhong secretly looked back from behind the tree and saw the fat figure beside Wang Lu, who was the focus of everyone's attention. He couldn't help but feel pain in his heart. That position used to belong to him, but he gave it to someone else. Regret? If he said that he didn't regret at all, he would be deceiving himself. But even if he could choose again, he would still insist on his current choice. Maybe he would. For a moment, everyone had their own thoughts. Only a gentle woman faintly congratulated them. Congratulations to the 2 senior brothers for completing the amazing challenge. In this regard, Wang Lu just laughed. Junior sister is too polite. But Wen Bao was at a loss and his fat cheeks suddenly turned red. Junior sister, you congratulated the wrong person. I actually didn't do anything. I'm so stupid that I didn't accomplish anything. It's all because of senior brother. Senior brother took me that. Seeing that this idiot was about to dance with joy under Yu Xinyao's gaze, and his limbs spasmed, Wang Lu stepped on him and promptly stopped the ugly performance. Yu Xinyao smiled with tolerance. Senior brother Wen is too modest. Not to mention other things, just the fact that you have the courage to follow senior brother Wang Lu and brave the Azure Dragon Gorge with just the 2 of you is already not easy. Xinyao asks herself honestly, I'm afraid I don't have the courage of senior brother Wen. Hearing this, Wen Bao's tears almost flowed down. Confidant, it was simply a confidant. Moreover, it was a confidant. Junior sister, what are you talking about? I was just lucky, that's all. Yu Xinyao also said, a person's opportunity is also a help that can't be ignored on the immortal path. Senior brother's deep immortal fate is very enviable. I think that when the elders accepted senior brother Wen as their disciple, it was also because of your immortal fate. Yu Xinyao still wanted to say something, but Wang Lu had already interrupted her helplessly. Junior sister, don't say any more. If you continue, not only will he cry, he will also pee. Happiness came too suddenly, you almost scared him to pee. Yu Xinyao tilted her head in confusion. Fortunately at this time, someone promptly opened his mouth to solve the problem. Wang Lu? Senior brother, I have a question that I really don't understand. There are countless powerful monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge, and even if they keep each other in check, they won't easily move out. However, you two have survived there for nearly a week. How did you do it? Wang Lu turned his head with a smile. Senior brother Mu Xiao, are you doubting the authenticity of our experiential learning? Mu Xiao shook his head. No, I'm just curious. Because your report didn't describe the process of the experiential learning, only the results were written, so I'm very curious about how you achieved this miracle. Hearing Mu Xiao's question, the other people also couldn't help but become interested. What exactly did two newcomers with such immature cultivation do to survive in the Azure Dragon Gorge for a week? That was a place of death for level 3 monsters. It was not easy to find a living space. It's very simple, find a few powerful monsters and kill them, then occupy their nest. Wouldn't there be a living space? Kill a powerful monster and then occupy their nest? Mu Xiao and his companions were stunned. This was completely the answer of why not eat minced meat. If they could kill a powerful monster at will, why would they need to be anxious to survive? He actually had the nerve to say it. Mu Xiao asked again, the so-called powerful monsters, probably refer to? Little Thunder, Purple Ivy, Giant Barbarian, and so on. Wang Lu casually counted. Mu Xiao was surprised. Giant Barbarian? If I remember correctly, not long ago the sect organized a large-scale experiential learning, and the target was a giant barbarian. Junior brother Yu Yun should have also participated in it, and his performance was outstanding. Yu Yun smiled bitterly. Yes, that time the target was a level 3 middle-rank giant barbarian, but its inner core was unexpectedly formed. Our group of 7 people went on the expedition, and although we broke its inner core, we still suffered a crushing defeat. The so-called outstanding performance was nothing more than helping several Misty Peak junior brothers and sisters to escape, that's all. It's really shameful to mention it. Mu Xiao sighed. At that time I remember that Misty Peak's XX junior brother led the team. He was a level 1 chi cultivating stage, only one step away from foundation building. The rest of them were also veterans who had experienced many trials, but they still failed miserably. Although the giant barbarian is a level 3 middle rank, it has an endless stream of strange techniques, and it's very difficult for chi cultivating stage cultivators to contend against it. Then everyone turned their eyes to Wang Lu again. The whole team suffered a crushing defeat, and the two of you, how did they do it? Wang Lu smiled, took out an item from his bag and showed it to everyone. It was a golden, slender, whisker-like object. Seeing this object, Yu Yun's pupils shrank, Mu Xiao retreated 2 steps, his complexion pale, and Zhu Qin opened his mouth wide, shaking his head in disbelief. For a moment, the Heavenly Policy Hall was completely silent. Only Wen, who couldn't figure it out, wondered, Senior brother Wang Lu, this is... The nearby Zhu Qin was shocked. Junior sister Wen, don't ask. Unfortunately, it was too late. Wang Lu laughed. Thank you for asking, junior sister. This is the giant barbarian's whip. Giant barbarians? What does that mean? Wen tilted her head, revealing a puzzled expression. Her slightly wrinkled eyebrows and pursed pink lips looked like an innocent little white flower. Then a pair of sinful flower-picking hands fell from the sky. The so-called giant barbarian's whip is the external genitalia of the giant barbarian, which is used to carry on the family line, as well as to expel waste water from the body. If we use the same human organ as an analogy, then it is... Before he could finish his words, Wen screamed, her cheeks flushed and stepped back a few steps. Senior brother Wang Lu, you are such a rogue. How could you take out such a dirty thing? Wang Lu was also stunned. Junior sister, why do you say that? It's just a genitalia, that's all. It's not a human's genitalia, it's just a monster's. What's the difference between this and the sheep's penis and dog's treasure in the Carefree Peaks cafeteria? It can even be said that the giant barbarian's whip as a material for refining pills and magical tools is more artistic than the sheep's penis and dog's treasure. Wen was ashamed and angry at the same time. That's also very dirty. I've clearly washed it clean. It's not a matter of whether it's clean or not, that thing is very dirty. It's already very dirty? That's a very serious prejudice. Wang Lu's expression became serious. Genitalia is a very broad concept. The flower on junior sister's head is the plant's genitalia. According to what you said, it's... I don't want to hear it. Wen pulled the flower petals out of her hair angrily, wrinkled her cute little nose and made a face at Wang Lu. Senior brother, you're being unreasonable. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Humph little girl, you're not sensible. Wang Lu failed to show off, so he resentfully put away the giant barbarian's whip. Anyway, as evidence, this thing was enough. Then they could get back to the point. Senior brother Mu Xiao, this time we came to you. In addition to submitting the registration report, there's another thing, which is to confirm the challenge points. Mu Xiao sighed in his heart. What will come will come. Senior brother Wang Lu, how many points in total? Wang Lu laughed and said, according to the sex calculation rules on challenge points, according to my calculation, the total should be 2,890 points. For a moment, many people had the impulse to spit out some liquid in their bodies. 2,890 points? Although they had long expected that senior brother Wang Lu's experiential learning would be exceptionally fruitful, when the final result appeared, it was still frightening to the point that they wanted to vomit blood. Wang Lu sighed. Our sex points rules encourage soldiers to take risks, to win big with small. Although it seems that there are some restrictions on the rewards for some extremely dangerous actions, but considering the bonus of those consecutive successful challenges, in the end, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. I studied hard in the 10-Cloud Hall for 2 years, but I almost couldn't catch up with this risky move. Alas, the life of an immortal cultivator is really lonely like snow. Lonely your sister. The local tycoon who gets 3,000 points in a week, please go die for me. We were just overjoyed because we got 10 points in our account. Hurry up and give us back our simple and pure happiness. While the junior brothers and sisters wanted to cry but had no tears, Yu Yun, as the guide, sighed and tried to pull back the atmosphere. Immortal cultivation is against the heaven's will. Without the spirit of survival in adversity and the spirit of taking risks, it is impossible to go far on the road of immortal cultivation. Senior brother Wang Lu has set a very good example for us. We should be like him in the future. Speaking up to here, Yu Yun was stuck. Like Wang Lu, bringing a dead fatty to the Azure Dragon Gorge to grind points? What kind of world weariness would that be? Shaking his head, Yu Yun said, in short, today our 2 experiential learning teams have successfully completed the task. It can be said to be a double blessing. Why don't we take this opportunity to have a meal together? After listening to this suggestion, Wang Lu looked at Zhu Qin, who was standing beside Yu Yun, with a complicated expression. He looked at a certain middle schooler who was still hiding behind the tree, and then looked at the pale Mu Xiao. In this situation, he wanted to gather this group of people together for a meal? Was this a rush? Yu Yun, you really have good eyesight. There was no other way at this time. A person with a high IQ like him was needed to clean up the mess. It is not good to eat immediately after exercise. Everyone has just finished their experiential learning, so let's forget about it. After a moment of awkward silence, Yu Yun finally recovered and said, that's right, everyone is very tired. Why don't we postpone the dinner? I'm the host, everyone must give me face. Certainly. The crowd quickly dispersed as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders, except for the 3 of them. Wang Lu didn't leave. Wen Bao also didn't dare to walk around, and Mu Xiao, who was being watched by Wang Lu with interest, couldn't move, as if his feet were rooted to the ground. Thinking of the bet of 100 spirit stones, Mu Xiao's heart was filled with sadness. He had worked hard in the sect for 30 years, and also had all kinds of subsidies from the Heavenly Policy Hall, but his net worth was only 10 or 20,000 spirit stones. This bet, even if he sold himself, he wouldn't be able to pay it back. However, thinking of this, Mu Xiao gritted his teeth. What was there to be afraid of? At worst, he would go to the Sword Tomb for 100 years and discuss with his master about the Sword Tomb subsidy in advance. No matter what, he would be able to pay off his debt. Wang Lu smiled and said, Senior brother Mu Xiao, it's getting late. Are you interested in having a meal together? It's my treat. Humph. If we can go to the Sword Tomb, why can't we have a meal together? Senior brother is so heroic. Wang Lu nodded. It just so happens that I know an excellent restaurant nearby. Senior brother, you probably haven't been there yet. Humph, even if it's a mountain of knives or a sea of flames, I won't hesitate. You lead the way. Wen Bao, who was next to him, was really puzzled. Senior brother Wang Lu, why do I feel that the atmosphere is a bit strange? Is there something between you and senior brother Mu Xiao? Wang Lu earnestly said, there is nothing between us. Chapter 52. In the canteen of Ethereal Peak, Wang Lu, Wen Bao and Mu Xiao took their seats in the main hall. Mu Xiao looked around at the scenery of the cafeteria, and his heart was filled with emotion. Ever since that famous chef from the Western continent came, he hadn't eaten here for a long time. Then he turned his head and looked at the Western continent famous dish on the table, looked up at the starry sky, and looked at the fish head standing on top of the flat cake. His heart was filled with a kind of sigh of sympathy. They were both in the same boat. Not long after, the cafeteria service puppet brought the dishes ordered by Wang Lu one by one, and 2 bottles of purple Western Continent wine. After pouring the wine for each of them, it quietly retreated. Wang Lu picked up the wine glass and smilingly said, "The environment is good, right? There are only 3 of us in such a big hall, and it's like a private room. You can't find this kind of treatment anywhere else." Mu Xiao sighed and thought to himself, "Isn't that right? Since we are a group of rare guests, the Western chef will probably come out to lick our boots." However, he was not in the mood to care about the cafeteria. "If you have something to say, please get straight to the point." "All right, then I won't stand on ceremony." Wang Lu put down his wine cup. "About our bet earlier. If I'm not wrong, senior brother, you probably can't afford it." Hee hee. Mu Xiao smiled bitterly and did not speak. 2,890 points are equivalent to 239,000 spirit stones. Even the elders of the sect would find it difficult to take out such a huge sum of money at once. Moreover, senior martial brother, you're just an ordinary disciple and you're in the middle of cultivating. However, it's alright if you can't pay me back. I don't intend to force you. Not forcing it? Upon hearing this, Mu Xiao was immediately stunned. Although it was somewhat inconceivable, could it be that the meaning of Wang Lu's words was, "No, when did their non-phase peak have such a compassionate heart?" According to the greedy 5th elder, he would probably give him a loan that he would never be able to repay in his entire life. It was precisely because of this that Mu Xiao had the impulse to go into closed-door cultivation in the Sword Tomb for 100 years. "Wang Lu, what are you trying to do? I've offended you before and now I admit defeat. If you want to kill me, do as you please, but don't make fun of me like this." But Wang Lu said seriously, "Mu Xiao Shixiang, we Lingjian school disciples are of the same branch. No matter what, we don't need to kill each other. Have we ever had an irreconcilable enmity? It was just a disagreement back then, a dispute, nothing more. How can there be hatred?" Even if Wang Lu wanted Mu Xiao to castrate himself on the spot, it would not make Mu Xiao more stunned than this. You are... How considerate are you? That doesn't sound like something you would say." Then he heard Wang Lu continue, "The dispute that day was not intentional by either of us, so there is no need for senior brother to blame yourself. Did senior brother deliberately make things difficult for me that day?" Mu Xiao hurriedly shook his head. "Absolutely not. But... Wang Lu laughed, "It's just a matter of face." "Face?" Mu Xiao murmured to himself. After a moment, he suddenly picked up the wine cup, drank it, and then sighed, "What a matter of face." For a moment, he didn't know how much entanglement there was in his heart. So, he suddenly poured a full cup of wine and drank it again. "Alas, senior brother Wang Lu, you're right. At that time, because, in short, I have some prejudice against you. Later on, senior brother, you didn't bow and scrape to me like the other younger generation disciples. Alas, because of my face I almost ruined your important matter." Mu Xiao said and picked up the wine cup. "I hope senior brother Wang Lu is magnanimous." "Senior brother Mu Xiao, you're too polite. Don't call me senior brother. According to the sect rules, before I master the king pill, I'm not qualified to be the senior brother of a true disciple. Alas, it's all because of face. I even forgot the sect rules." While talking, he drank another cup of wine. This Misty Peak Cafeteria's Western Continent wine was brewed with some heavenly materials and earthly treasures. After a few cups, Mu Xiao was already slightly tipsy. "Then, as for that bet, senior brother Wang Lu, you can rest assured that I will pay you back no matter what. Tomorrow, I will quit my job in Heavenly Policy Hall and go down the mountain to gain experience. Speaking of earning spirit stones, it's faster to go down the mountain. With my shoot-on stage strength, as long as I work hard, it's not impossible to earn 200,000 spirit stones." Wang Lu advised, "I've already said that you don't need to worry about the gambling debt." "Alas, how can I not worry about it? Especially after listening to senior brother Wang Lu's advice, it makes me even more ashamed. If I really put the gambling debt behind me, I won't be able to eat and sleep well in the future. And if I have a mental state, there will be obstacles in my cultivation. I'm afraid I will never be able to reach a higher realm in my life." Wang Lu sighed, "You're too persistent." Mu Xiao said with a smile, "As a cultivator, how can I not have some persistence? Haha, maybe with this opportunity, after I go down the mountain, my cultivation will be even more refined. Within 10 years, I'll let you all see if I can master the king pill." Seeing that Mu Xiao had already become impassioned under the influence of alcohol, Wang Lu nodded, "It's really praiseworthy to have such lofty sentiments and lofty aspirations. But junior brother Mu Xiao, you might as well think about it. If you really go down the mountain, what will Uncle Lucien think of me?" Mu Xiao froze for a moment. "This? I will explain to him. I'm afraid that the more I explain, the worse it will get. You also know Uncle Lucien's temper. What's more, if the Heavenly Policy Hall loses manpower, what will happen to the daily work? Grabbing other junior brothers to replace them, I'm afraid it will be difficult to achieve senior brothers' efficiency. Mu Xiao suddenly felt a chill in his head, mumbling, "Then what should I do?" Wang Lu inwardly smiled, thinking that the key link had finally arrived. Oh, speaking of which, it's a coincidence. I have a slightly difficult matter here and need junior brother Mu's help. Mu Xiao quickly said, "There's no harm in saying it. Anything is fine." Wang Lu said, "In fact, this matter is not difficult for junior brother, but it will help me a lot. If you are willing to help, it is no less than 200,000 spirit stones." Is there such a thing? Mu Xiao was surprised. Yes, this experiential learning in the small clear sky peak may be a miracle in the eyes of others, but in fact, for me there are still some shortcomings. Mu Xiao suddenly clicked his tongue. There are still shortcomings? This is simply not letting people live. Wang Lu said, but in fact in the process of experiential learning when Bao and I have reached our limits, and there is no room for further improvement in our tactics. After thinking about it, the current lineup is a bit weak, and if we want to make up for the shortcomings, we need to introduce new people. Mu Xiao nodded to show his understanding, but what does this have to do with me? Does he need me to help recommend people? It's like this, I hope to introduce foreign aid. His identity is a bit special. Mu Xiao froze for a moment, then frowned. Could it be someone from the evil path? Oh, where can I get to know someone from the evil path? Don't worry, there is no problem with his background. On this point, I can issue a guarantee in the name of the fifth elder so you won't be embarrassed. The special thing about the foreign aid I want is that the other party is not a cultivator, but a mortal world's martial artist. Mortal world's martial artist? Mu Xiao was taken aback. Isn't that the same as courting death? Wang Lu pointed to himself. Don't forget, I am actually just a mortal world's martial artist. I can guarantee that person is absolutely strong. Even if I die, that person will not die. This is the key to me completing the challenge. Mu Xiao hesitated, but according to the rules. Wang Lu said, yes, according to the rules, except for a successor disciple like me, the clear sky peak does not allow mortals to enter, but generally speaking, if there is a special guarantee from the sex elder, then it is a different matter. Now, I can casually issue a guarantee from the fifth elder. The key is whether junior brother Mu Xiao will recognize it or not. Mu Xiao nodded in silence, understanding the crux of the problem. If it was just a stingy rule, Wang Lu could issue a guarantee in the name of the elder, and it would be a special case to bring in foreign aid. But as the saying goes, rules are dead and people are alive. In order to avoid practical difficulties, a clerk like Mu Xiao was needed to adapt to the situation. But now there were two problems. First, was it legal for Wang Lu to falsely use the elder's seal? Second, even if it was really issued by the fifth elder, given her special character, it was another matter whether the guarantee would be effective or not. So the final decision to allow Wang Lu to bring in foreign aid was indeed made by Mu Xiao. But this was indeed a bit difficult. According to Mu Xiao's character, this kind of application with too much uncertainty and too high risk would generally be rejected. But the applicant was, after all, senior brother Wang Lu. But if he agreed to it, it would be a great violation of the relevant rules. Just when Mu Xiao was hesitating, Wang Lu said again, if junior brother Mu Xiao feels that this matter is not reliable enough, I can think of another way. At this point, Mu Xiao could only clench his teeth and said, even if this matter is not reliable, but senior brother Wang Lu, you are absolutely reliable, I trust you. So, I will write a permission letter for you, leaving the name blank. Senior brother, you can fill it however you want. I have a seal with me, I will stamp it for you. While saying that, Mu Xiao took out the seal that symbolized the authority of the Heavenly Policy Hall from his mustard seed bag and stamped a red seal on the lower right corner of the golden sincerity paper. Ha, it's done then, senior brother, you can fill it as you please. But because it is a sincerity paper, you must write your real name. After filling it, your companion will be able to pass through the small clear sky peaks restriction. Hearing this, Wang Lu frowned but immediately stretched out his eyebrows. He picked up his wine cup and said with a smile, junior brother Mu Xiao is really straightforward. Senior brother, I will drink first. Good. Drink. Although he had casually done something that completely violated the operating rules, Mu Xiao felt as if he had been worn out. He put down the wine cup, picked up the wine pot, and drank to his heart's content, which shocked the nearby Wang Lu and Wen Bao. However, this Shudan stage cultivator, who had been engaged in public service for 3 years, had already cultivated a huge amount of spirit grass. Under the effect of the spirit grass brewed wine, he began to feel dizzy and tipsy, but his mood was even more carefree. "Ah, this is really refreshing." Wang Lu also laughed. "It is indeed refreshing. But let's not just drink without eating. Let's eat, let's eat. This is the traditional cuisine of the Western continent, we must taste it." Mu Xiao muddle-headedly picked up his chopsticks, picked up a piece of the starry sky pancake that was filled with the curse and resentment of the fishhead star people, and subconsciously put it into his mouth. Then he fell to the ground, unable to get up again. Chapter 53. After using the Misty Peak cafeteria's traditional weapon to deal with Mu Xiao, Wang Lu called the cafeteria service puppet to send him back to his residence. Holding the golden document in his hand, Wang Lu laughed and shook his head. He really believed it. Sure enough, public officials are especially easy to talk to on the table. Wen Bao, who had been silent for a long time, finally couldn't hold back his curiosity. "Senior brother, what were you and senior brother Mu Xiao doing? Seemed like you had a bet with him?" Therefore Wang Lu explained the bet that they made before this trip to the small clear sky peak. Wen Bao was immediately surprised. "Senior brother, according to what you said, it's a bet of at least 200,000 spirit stones. You just give up like that? Just for this piece of paper?" Wang Lu said, "Do you really think that 200,000 spirit stones can be obtained? Even if Mu Xiao sells himself, he can't afford it. Moreover, we are fellow disciples, but because of a quarrel, one of them had to go into seclusion in the Sword Tomb. This kind of thing is enough to alarm the Heavenly Sword Hall. At that time it will not be easy to clean up. So instead of staring at the 200,000 spirit stones that can't be obtained, it would be better to get something practical." When Bao stared at the golden document in Wang Lu's hand. Was this the thing that senior brother was talking about? In fact, the real harvest is not just this piece of paper. You know, according to the rules, signing this thing to me is against the rules. For a public official who has been working hard for more than 3 years, this is a big risk. If it weren't for the table, even if he owes me 200,000 spirit stones, I'm afraid he wouldn't be so happy to trample on the rules. Wen Bao didn't really understand. And then? For public officials, breaking the rules is like taking drugs. Once there is the first time, the second and third time will follow, and it is impossible to return to the original life. What is that saying? That door has been broken and happiness will never come back. Seeing that Wen Bao's ability to understand was like a domestic animal's, Wang Lu decided to directly draw a conclusion. In short, it is very convenient to use the power of Mu Xiao, a public official, to seek personal gain. Wen Bao suddenly realized, I knew it, senior martial brother spent so much effort, it can't really be for the sake of friendship, he must have a purpose. Of course he wouldn't dare to say this even if he had 10,000 guts. Also, senior brother, what did you mean when you said that you had regrets about that training? It's literally what it means. Although I fought all the monsters that I should have fought, I was limited by my lack of strength at that time, so I didn't collect many medicinal herbs and didn't achieve many achievements. In the end, I only survived in the Azure Dragon Gorge for 7 days before I had no choice but to retreat. I didn't achieve the goal of 10 days. Don't you feel indignant? Don't you think we should do something next? Of course, Wen Bao didn't think so. He didn't know how to spend the 3,000 challenge points he had, and he didn't even have time to digest junior sister Yu's sincere praise. How could he think about what was going to happen next? Oh, in any case, I am still brooding over those red refined fruits, so after resting for 2 days I still have to go to the small clear sky peak. Wen Bao was stunned. He blinked his eyes and waited for senior brother Wang Lu to continue. Of course you too. Sure enough, I can't run away. Wen Bao lamented and put his plump chin on the table. Although the experiential learning challenge was over, thinking about the extreme week he spent in the small clear sky peak, as well as the countless crises he encountered during that time, he still felt his hair stand on end and his legs go soft. However, just now in the Heavenly Policy Hall, junior sister Yu's gentle smile appeared in his mind at this moment. That sweet voice, that gentle and beautiful appearance immediately injected boundless courage into Fatty. Although his left and right legs were weak, the right side of his left leg and the left side of his right leg gradually became firm. Good, let's go. But, senior brother, what's the matter with the foreign aid you mentioned? Do we really need to find someone to help us? What kind of person is it? Of course it's a super strong master, otherwise, there would be no need to go through so much trouble. Wen Bao smiled and began to try to flatter his senior brother, in front of senior brother who dares to call themselves a master. Isn't it just a mortal world's martial artist? Wang Lu sneered, It's true that he's a mortal world's martial artist, but to be honest, I'm not even qualified to be his punching bag. Do you understand? Wen Bao of course couldn't understand. Senior brother Wang Lu, you actually used a self-deprecating method to flatter others? This is completely not in line with your character. However, the master Wang Lu mentioned really aroused his interest. For Wang Lu to be so eager, how high was that person? Oh, come with me to visit him, then you'll know. With that, Wang Lu stood up. Wen Bao was surprised. Now? Of course now. While it's not too late, I still want to find a place to eat something. You don't think I'll really eat these so-called Western delicacies, do you? Wen Bao nodded in agreement. With his size, it was natural for him to not be picky about food. However, even Wen Bao had no interest in the Misty Peaks cafeteria. Then the two of them boldly got up and walked away. When they left the cafeteria, they seemed to hear the heartbroken sigh of a chef at the kitchen door. Wen Bao couldn't help but say, actually, that chef has been working very hard. Even if there are no customers, she has been constantly updating her dishes for the past 2 years. Yes, unfortunately, the route is wrong. The more knowledge you have, the more reactionary you become. That fellow has no cooking talent. I heard that she is second to none in the Western continent, but eating and cooking are two completely different things, okay? I don't know which donkey kicked Marshal Uncle Lucien's head that he hired her as a chef. Wen Bao thought for a moment and said, I remember half a year ago she updated a dish. She said that she integrated her life experience in the Western continent into the food. It was a culinary delicacy that contained profound truth, which could make the taster enjoy an extraordinary experience. Wang Lu, as a long-term food ticket holder of the Misty Peaks cafeteria, naturally understood. He angrily nodded and said, the result was clearly an enhanced version of the look up at the starry sky. 13 fish heads were neatly stacked on the edge of a round pancake, and then she explained that this symbolized everyone's equality, regardless of their status. Damn it. At that moment she was practically possessed by my master. There was no limit to her trickery. Wen Bao was stunned. I think she was serious at that time. That, to describe it in a literary way, her pair of green eyes were full of sadness. Wang Lu glanced at Wen Bao. Fatty, you should give up. Even if you read all the women's magazines in the sect, you can't become a literary Superman to win the favor of junior sister you. Thereupon, Wen Bao's dark brown eyes were full of sadness. I just want to shorten the distance between me and her. Then you have to lose your belly first. By the way, senior brother, you said you want to find something to eat, but we're not going to the Carefree Peak. Wang Lu laughed. What's so delicious about the Carefree Peak? Just follow me. Then Wen Bao followed Wang Lu down the Spirit Sword Mountain in a daze. Walking on the quiet path of the Spirit Creek town, Wen Bao became more and more alarmed. Senior brother, where are we going? Haha, we're already here, why are you still asking? In the Spirit Creek town, only the Ru family inn is reliable, right? Ru family inn? Wen Bao almost jumped up. That's the Ru family inn where the lady boss would kick the customers out of the door and roll them down the slope, sell a white radish for 1,000 taels of silver, and force them to promote new air Hong? Wang Lu gave Wen Bao a deep look. Yes, that's the lady boss who would kick the customers out of the inn. Moreover, with her six senses magical ability, even if you were standing here, she could hear you clearly and remember you for the rest of her life. Wen Bao's legs went soft on the spot. I beg you not to go. Interesting, you can go to the Azure Dragon Gorge, but you can't go to the Ru family inn? Wen Bao painfully explained, Senior brother, please forgive me. I'd rather face those monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge than face the lady boss of the Ru family inn. Whenever I think of her, my legs go soft. Even when I think of junior sister Yu's smile, I can't get hard. Oh, you're so young yet you can't get hard. Are you going to be a pushover for the rest of your life? Wang Lu ridiculed him, but in his heart he was also surprised. This fatty's intuition was really sharp. In terms of strength, the lady boss, who could break a magical weapon with one hand and beat the fifth elder like a sandbag, was indeed much stronger than those third-level monsters in the small clear sky peak, although she was only a mortal martial artist. Even if it was Wang Lu himself, he would not be willing to face the hostility of the lady boss. However, this time she's an ally, so you don't have to worry about anything. Ally? Senior brother, the reinforcement you were talking about is her? Dang dang dang. Under Wen Bao's urgent gaze, Wang Lu unscrupulously knocked on the door of the Ru family inn. Because of the poor business, this inn, which had no sincerity in operating it, closed early all year round. At this time the door was closed and obviously did not receive guests. However, Wang Lu obviously did not intend to pay attention to this closed door. Shortly after the knock on the door, a sleepy and lazy voice came from inside the door. Closed, no more business. Wang Lu smiled. It just so happens that I don't intend to pay. Lady boss, quickly come out to receive the guest. Then he openly pushed the door open and entered. This unscrupulous face made Wen Bao even more nervous. Receive your sister. With a mocking voice, the lady boss staggered out of the guest room on the second floor. From her wrinkled clothes and sleepy eyes, it was not difficult to determine that Wang Lu had just interrupted her sleep. However, when the lady boss saw Wang Lu, she couldn't help but smile. Adultery. Wen Bao's first judgment was made, and then he admired Wang Lu from the bottom of his heart. Lingjian School did not prohibit and even encouraged the exchange of feelings between disciples. Misty Peak, Carefree Peak and other places also had many Dao companions, but to fall in love with this fierce beast in human form, senior brother Wang Lu, you are really too manly. While Wen Bao was letting his imagination run wild, the lady boss also saw him. From the perspective of his physique, there was no way she couldn't see him. Then the lady boss smiled evilly. Oh Wang Lu, you can come if you want, but you also brought a beast. Are you here for a sumptuous meal? Wen Bao immediately knelt down. This Ru family was indeed a scam. The lady boss clearly wanted to make human meat buns and the filling was fat. Wang Lu smiled. Indeed, I am here for a sumptuous meal. Lady boss, please serve 4 dried fruits, 4 fresh fruits, 2 salted and sour fruits and 4 candied fruits. The lady boss yawned. There are apples on the counter, peel them and eat them yourself. Wang Lu was silent for a while. Then do you have roasted quail, stir-fried duck feet, chicken tongue soup, deer tripe brewed with ginger, beef tendons, chrysanthemum rabbit shreds, stir-fried deer legs, ginger and vinegar gold and silver trotters? The lady boss looked deeply at Wang Lu, and then pointed to the dining table at the side. You guys sit down and wait, I'll go cook. A moment later the lady boss came out with 3 bowls of clear noodles. Sir, your dishes have all been served. Wang Lu looked at the clear noodles. Lady boss, your dishes have shrunk to the point of becoming an evil god? Show me some sincerity. It's rare for me to bring a guest here. But the lady boss said inhumanely, it's already sincerity enough that I didn't serve you the fodder. What else do you want? If you want to eat, eat. If not, get lost. Since there was no other way, he would just eat. Before the others could say anything, Wen Bao had already picked up his chopsticks. Wen Bao was also very hungry. Although he couldn't eat those famous dishes that Wang Lu had just ordered, a bowl of clear noodles was also good. It was better than looking up at the starry sky. Thinking of this, he took a sip of the noodle soup. The next moment, Wen Bao's expression became very strange. Because the taste of the noodles was far beyond his imagination. Wen Bao had thought that it was at most a farmer's craft, but when the noodle soup entered his mouth, the refreshing and delicious taste made him feel as if he had returned to the good times of a few years ago. This lady boss has hidden her skills well. Senior brother Wang Lu really brought him to a good place. Although he had tasted all kinds of luxurious dishes in the canteen of the Carefree Peak in the past 2 years, the dishes that reflected the chef's skills were usually the noodle soup, sliced pork and other simple dishes. Just this bowl of noodles alone made Wen Bao sure that the lady boss was definitely a top-notch chef. Not long after, the 3 bowls were clean. The lady boss wiped the table and asked, looking for me in the middle of the night, what's the matter? Wang Lu also went straight to the point, I want to go to the small clear sky peak to pick some herbs, but now I lack a hired thug. Lady boss, I see that you are a good bodyguard material, so I want to use you as a labor force. Then the lady boss very enthusiastically responded to Wang Lu's invitation. I don't have the time, I'm busy. Oh, busy closing the shop? In any case, no one will come to your inn. Damn, you can't talk nonsense like that. Wang Lu directly poked the lady boss's sore spot, so she slapped the table and stood up. What do you mean no one will come? In the past 2 years, my inn's daily turnover has exceeded 10,000 silver taels. What else do you want? Wen Bao was surprised. So much? Wang Lu was also surprised. You're actually talking about the average, you're really shameless. 2 years ago, in the Immortal Gathering, I helped you earn more than 10 million silver taels, which is indeed 10,000. But you still have the nerve to say that. 2 days ago, Elder Luli also announced that the average savings of the sect's disciples is 70,000 spirit stones. I don't know how many disciples scolded you. The lady boss choked and couldn't spit out even half a word. Wang Lu continued to earnestly persuade her. In any case, you're just wasting your life here. Why don't you come with me to the mountain to cultivate your moral character? The lady boss laughed. You, a vulgar person, are also qualified to talk about moral character? Hey, please show some respect to the Spirit Sword Sect's top student. Let's not talk about the 6 A's in the cultural course. Even before we entered the mountain, we were already famous students, proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy and painting, and have always been full of moral character. The lady boss continued to laugh. It's just that moral character is more urgent, right? Seeing that the lady boss was stubborn, and that after 2 years of bickering with him, her level had already rapidly risen to a level close to his, Wang Lu decided to use his killer move, no longer talking nonsense with the lady boss, and decide the outcome in one round. Wang Lu kowtowed, "Master, please help your disciple." The lady boss spurted out on the spot, and at the same time when Bao, who was watching from the side, also felt his heart stop beating for a moment. "Senior brother Wang Lu, isn't your image collapsing too fast?" Wang Lu looked up with a serious face. "This is the so-called a day as a teacher, a lifetime as a slave." "Oh, wrong, a day as a teacher means 100 days of kindness. Master, you can't just leave your disciple like this." The lady boss put on a frightened expression. "Hey, don't scare me. Letting you kowtow like this, it feels like, in your words, it feels like raising a strange flag." After hesitating for a moment, seeing that Wang Lu was about to kowtow again, the lady boss finally couldn't help but give in. Okay, since you're so sincere in begging me, then I'll reluctantly help you, but please don't kowtow to me again." Wang Lu was overjoyed and he fiercely inserted his chopsticks on the table. "Master, accept this kowtow from your disciple." Chapter 54. After experiencing an unimaginable low-limit offensive, Wang Lu succeeded in obtaining the lady boss's promise. 1 week later, the 3 of them would once again ascend the Clear Sky Peak. The reason why they chose 1 week later was because after 1 week, the Clear Sky Peak's 7th elder would return to the mountain. At that time, it would not be easy for them to casually plunder the small Clear Sky Peak. However, with the lady boss's super strong external help, Wang Lu's heart was at ease, and he was full of confidence for the operation 1 week later. Thinking back, the trivial 5th elder could bring him to wreak havoc in the small Clear Sky Peak, and the lady boss could single-handedly blow him up. With this kind of top-level master acting as a substitute, what was the difference between the so-called small Clear Sky Peak in their own backyard? This was the logic of a professional adventurer. When they found that the current lineup was not enough to achieve their goal, their first reaction was not to make up for the shortcomings, but to find a way to take drastic measures to solve all problems. Asking the lady boss to leave the mountain was a very typical example. Another reason for choosing 1 week later was, after experiencing the last experiential learning, Wang Lu felt that he would soon break through the 8th layer of the sword bone. This week was just the right time to improve his cultivation and cross the last hurdle of the body forging stage. This was another typical problem-solving logic of a professional adventurer. If you can solve it yourself, then don't ask for help from others. In the end, if Wang Lu had enough cultivation, he would not need to go through so much trouble. Wouldn't it be more inconvenient to directly go through the small Clear Sky Peak? In the path of immortal cultivation, the most important thing was the cultivation of the immortal cultivation stage. Therefore, even though Wang Lu had 6 A's and nearly 10,000 challenge points, he never became complacent. Instead, his sense of crisis continued to strengthen. Because in the past 2 years, even someone as stupid as Wen Bao had reached the 8th grade Qi cultivating stage. The fatty was lucky enough to break through during the experiential learning in the small Clear Sky Peak. As for Wang Lu himself, he was still lingering at the body forging stage. Although his basic skills were more solid than anyone else in the sect, and if it was a one-on-one duel, the first grade of body forging stage was enough to beat Wang Bao to the point that he would cry for his parents. However, the fact that his realm was low could not be changed. Fortunately, his 2 years of training was not in vain. Now it was time for Wang Lu's cultivation to explode. After a long preparation, the 8th layer of non-phase sword bone finally ushered in the last hurdle. Once this hurdle was broken, his body forging stage would come to an end. As for whether the void spirit root could be cultivated after the age of chaos, the answer would be revealed at that time. Because of this, Wang Lu set aside a week's time to break through, hoping that nothing would go wrong. Of course, this alone was not enough. Before his master left, the 5th elder had left a note and seriously reminded him that he had to find someone to protect him during the final stage of the 8th layer of the sword bone. Actually, even if he didn't ask, just based on the fact that this non-phase method came from the hands of that unreliable and unscrupulous person, Wang Lu couldn't be at ease and boldly copy it. Especially in the 8th layer of the sword bone, he must find someone to protect him. The problem was, who should he look for? The answer was also very simple. He should look for his master. Since his fifth master had run away to sell the stolen goods, then he should look for the lady boss's master at the foot of the mountain and talk to her about the key technique to break through this hurdle. The internal inspection technique was passed down by the lady boss. If he didn't look for her, who else could he look for? And regarding the work of protecting him, the lady boss was also very interested. Although that fellow Wang Wu is really asking for a beating, her non-phase method is indeed broad and profound, especially this non-phase sword bone. Every time there's a revision, there's always a surprise. I haven't seen the latest version that you're currently practicing. Even if you don't say it, I will still watch you until the end. Well, do you think I'm a monkey? However, if it's a monkey, then so be it. With the lady boss watching from the side, Wang Lu had nothing to worry about. For the next 5 days, Wang Lu simply stayed at the Ru family inn. He also took a leave of absence from the cultural classes during the day. Everything was for this 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone. Then every day he took the medicine on time and strictly followed the instructions in the notebook. Although he didn't do any further practice, his previous accumulation was deep enough. With the assistance of the medicine, an astonishing energy gradually gathered and brewed, preparing for the next eruption. Of course, the whole process was seen by Wang Lu through the internal inspection technique. Now, using the internal inspection technique, he saw that in the deep darkness, more than 200 jade pillars were emitting a flickering golden light, illuminating a vast space. In the midst of the light, countless paths were continuously distributed. Some were connected to each other, forming a huge cycle. Some gradually became detailed, going deep into the distance where the light couldn't reach. And at the side of the path, there were surging rivers and continuous mountains. In the short span of a month, Wang Lu's internal inspection technique had almost reached the large success stage. At this moment, his meridians, bones, flesh and blood were all clearly discernible. Everything was under his control. This kind of frightening progress left even the lady boss speechless. However, he was still a step away from the realm where his master had mentioned in the notebook. When he reached the large success stage, the secret of the void spirit root would suddenly be revealed. Of course, this wasn't strange. The so-called large success stage of Wang Lu's internal inspection technique was the large success stage of the martial artist realm. According to the standards of the path of immortals, this was just the beginning. And the next step, according to the notebook, should be to adjust the body's breathing rhythm, in other words, to circulate the qi and blood, causing the light of more than 200 jade pillars to flicker in a unified rhythm. Then the answer to the riddle would naturally appear. In the past 5 days, Wang Lu had only done this one thing. Although his master had only said a few words in the notebook, in reality, the difficulty level was so high that it made people's hair stand on end. With Wang Lu's current ability, it wasn't difficult to adjust the flickering rhythm of a single jade pillar. But if he adjusted multiple jade pillars, the difficulty level would increase exponentially. Moreover, to take care of more than 200 jade pillars at the same time was almost enough to cause one to have a mental breakdown. Fortunately, Wang Lu was Wang Lu. After continuously meditating for 4 days and 4 nights, he finally found the trick and gradually integrated the rhythm. At the same time as the light flickered in a unified manner, the deeper level of the body's details were also exposed. For example, the acupoints that were scattered all over the space like the stars in the night sky, or the end of the golden jade pillars, where there was a layer of boundary that seemed to exist and not exist. However, these details could only be seen when the light of the 200 jade pillars flickered to the extreme. Once the light dimmed, it would immediately be hidden in the darkness. But as the last obstacle of the 8th layer approached, the light of the jade pillars also continued to grow stronger, and the frequency of the flickering also increased. Those details became harder and harder to hide, and the breakthrough was already something that could happen at any time. Late at night on the 6th day, the opportunity to break through finally arrived. When the 206 jade pillars flickered in unison, they suddenly lit up and emitted a dazzling brilliance. However, before he could take a closer look, the light suddenly dimmed. At the same time, a new light source slowly lit up in the middle of the space. There were 206 bones in the human body. Although it varied from person to person, after cultivating for more than 2 years, Wang Lu was sure that he didn't have any more bones than ordinary people. So, where did this newly born sword bone come from? It wasn't written too clearly in his master's notes, but after witnessing the birth of a new sword bone, Wang Lu suddenly understood the true meaning of the 8th layer of sword bone. The golden light of the sword bone flickered like the breath of a new creature. The non-phase sword bone nurtured each bone as if it was a new life, allowing it to continue to develop and grow. However, this was not enough. The next step was to integrate the power of the sword bones so that they could play a greater role. Wang Lu adjusted his qi and blood so that the sword bone's radiance was uniform, and this was what he was doing. However, this step was still not enough, because the uniformity of Wang Lu's radiance was based on Wang Lu's deep meditation. Once he loosened the control of the sword bone's breathing, the rhythm would fall into disorder, and all his efforts would be wasted. However, no matter how talented Wang Lu was, it was impossible for him to stay in a state of meditation forever, unless he intentionally became a vegetable. Then the next goal was very clear, which was to find a way to make these sword bones obedient, without the need for their master's command. And now, Wang Wu's idea was to use the energy of the 206 sword bones' unified breathing to create a new bone. Just like in the Western continent, there was a legend about the supreme ring, the imperial ring. This sword bone was born to be a cut above the others. Once it was born, it would force the other sword bones to synchronize with it, so as to achieve a situation of great unity. And this sword bone could be said to be the emperor bone. After cultivating to this point, no matter how much criticism Wang Lu had toward his master, he had to admit that this guy's self-created method was really something. The 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone was only the realm of the body refining stage, but the skill contained within it was brilliant, and the effect of the sword bone was powerful, which had completely surpassed the mortal world's martial arts. He stayed in the sect for 2 years, and he had seen a lot of immortal cultivation methods. Not to mention the chi cultivating stage, which didn't emphasize the body refining stage. Even the foundation establishment stage's body refining stage seemed to pale in comparison to this 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone. However, behind the high profit there was also a high risk. When Wang Lu calmed his mind and continued to accelerate the emperor bone's maturation according to the handwritten method, a sudden change occurred. An intense pain emerged from the 206 bones in his body. In a flash, it was as if all the bones in his body were broken. The pain was enough to destroy the mind of any normal person. Wang Lu's breathing was almost disordered. Fortunately, he was a cultivator and his perseverance was extraordinary. Soon he was able to suppress this astonishing pain. However, the next moment the emperor bone suddenly jumped, and the pain was several times more intense than before. The reason was very simple. Since it was born as the emperor, it should be supreme. Then why should the supreme emperor bone listen to the command of Wang Lu? The moment the emperor bone was born, it subdued the 206 non-phase sword bones, and then commanded the 200 soldiers to wave the flag of rebellion against its master, Wang Lu. But this time, the pain caused by the emperor bone completely overrode his reason. The psychological line of defense that Wang Lu had painstakingly forged collapsed in an instant. His body suddenly bounced. Unsurprisingly, the next moment, the sword bone's cultivation would go berserk, and his body would completely collapse. However, at this time, the lady boss, who acted as the protector, finally made her move. Bang! The lady boss's action was simple and crude. She forcefully slapped the center of Wang Lu's forehead. However, at the same time, the emperor bone inside Wang Lu's body suddenly shook, as if it was struck by lightning. A moment later, the brilliance dissipated, and the emperor bone became silent. The emperor bone, which was condensed from the essence of Wang Lu's whole body, was unexpectedly defeated by the lady boss's slap. The emperor bone stabilized and the rest of the sword bones also calmed down. The pain also receded like the tide. Wang Lu slowly opened his eyes and took a deep breath. Just now, that strange change happened in an instant. For a moment, his reason was almost torn apart by the surging pain. Now, although the sword bones had stabilized, the residual pain still faintly flared up. Fortunately, it was not difficult to resist. However, in retrospect, it was really dangerous. If the lady boss's action was a beat slower, then everything would have been over. It was no wonder that his master had repeatedly urged him to find someone to protect him. Judging from the situation just now, if there was no one to assist him, anyone would undoubtedly die at the moment of breaking through the 8th level. Fortunately, the lady boss was reliable enough to turn the tide. "How do you feel?" As the biggest contributor, the young girl asked with a face full of concern. Wang Lu cleared his throat and said, "Many thanks for helping me to quell the rebellion. I will bestow you with the hereditary title of *****. Get lost. Chapter 55. My beloved minister has rendered meritorious service in protecting the emperor. How about I grant you the title of *********? The lady boss's face suddenly became extremely painful. "Since you still have the mood to talk nonsense, it seems like there's nothing else. Then I'll go back to sleep. You can slowly experience the thrill of the new realm." With that, the lady boss yawned and then pushed the door open to leave. As for Wang Lu, just like what the lady boss said, he was experiencing the thrill of this breakthrough. The 8th layer of non-phase sword bone, since the birth of the Emperor Bone, was announced to have reached the grand accomplishment stage. More than 200 sword bones with powerful vitality, under the command of the Emperor Bone, released a terrifying energy several times more than before. Although he only broke through one level, the overall improvement of his strength was already difficult to measure. Crack. Wang Lu casually reached out and broke off the corner of the bedside cabinet. The hardwood was crushed into pieces by him. Perhaps this was a matter of course for any cultivator who had reached the grand accomplishment stage, but Wang Lu, who specialized in non-phase sword bone, had never experienced such a powerful increase in strength. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he seemed to have no affinity with the destructive power. This confirmed what his master said: attack, speed, all were evil, only hardness was everything. In fact, after reaching the grand accomplishment stage of the 8th layer, the nature of the non-phase sword bone did not change. It was still extremely good at defense and ignored the destructive power. The current increase in strength was just the side effect of the upgrade of the non-phase sword bone, but the side effect was so significant. It was difficult for Wang Lu to estimate the toughness of his body. Perhaps compared to those cultivators with foundation-building cultivation base, his body was not inferior to them. And this was only the grand accomplishment stage of the body refining stage, not even the chi cultivating stage. The non-phase sword bone was an extreme cultivation path. However, to this extent, no matter how picky Wang Lu was, he had to admit that he was convinced. His master, that slut, was able to firmly occupy a seat in the Heavenly Sword Hall because of her uniqueness. According to Wang Lu's situation, even though that guy's cultivation level is a bit low, his defensive ability may not be inferior to those peak nascent soul stage elders? Of course, this was just a guess. The difference between King Pill and nascent soul was far greater than the difference between lower realms. Not to mention that those elders were all at the peak of nascent soul. In theory, if they fought against someone at the peak of King Pill, they would at least be able to fight against 10 people. Although his master's non-phase method was peerless, as a disciple of the Spirit Sword sect, the several elders' unique skill was not necessarily inferior. With the pain in the ass spirit of a professional adventurer, Wang Lu secretly imagined the scene of his master committing a crime, being caught by the second and third elders, and having to pay for her crime with her body. After that, he sighed with emotion that he had been deeply poisoned by the atmosphere of non-phase peak for 2 years, which was already beyond redemption. Now was not the time to fantasize. Mastering the 8th level of the sword bone was gratifying, but the next step was the most crucial one: guiding the chi into his body. According to his master, when he successfully mastered the 8th level of the sword bone, he would understand the secret of the void spirit root and guide the chi into his body. So, what was the difference between now and before? Wang Lu closed his eyes again, put the residual pain in his body to the back of his mind, and once again entered the world of internal vision. When he opened his eyes, Wang Lu suddenly felt enlightened. When he looked around, the sky was actually clear and boundless. Under the golden sunlight, what came into view was a stretch of green water, green mountains, gurgling streams, and fragrant flowers. Witnessing this scene, it took Wang Lu some time to sort out his thoughts. Just like what his master said, once he successfully mastered the 8th level, everything was indeed different. Originally, in this space, although there were mountains and rivers, and there were also more than 200 bright jade pillars that illuminated the 4 directions, but in the distance where the light could not reach, it was oppressively pure darkness. Using the internal vision to inspect was like walking in a bustling night scene. However, now it was as bright as day. Not only the space around him, but even the distance was illuminated by the intense blue light. The 206 sword bones in his body were still emitting light, but they were all covered by an even more intense light source. That was the sun above his head, the Emperor Bone that was struck down by the Lady Boss, which had become the key to change everything. The existence of the Emperor Bone not only meant that there was a dazzling light source in his body, but more importantly, it allowed Wang Lu to see the distant place, the boundary that was propped up by the 206 sword bones. According to what Wang Lu had learned in the sect, that boundary was the most important part of a cultivator's spirit root, an existence similar to a filter. Outside the boundary was the omnipresent spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and inside the boundary was the cultivator's jade mansion. Of course, for Wang Lu, who had just reached the body refining stage, it was still not a jade mansion. It was just a foundation, also known as the inner mansion. The process of a cultivator's cultivation, in the simplest terms, was to absorb the spiritual energy from the outside into the jade mansion, and then transform it into their own power. It could be immortal power, magical power, demon power, thousands upon thousands of them, and it varied from person to person. However, the vast majority of cultivators had to go through this process from the outside to the inside. Generally speaking, it was to draw spiritual energy into the body. In this process, the most critical factor was a person's spirit root, which was the existence of that layer of filter. For the vast majority of mortals, the boundary that separated the inside from the outside was like a strict barrier. The spiritual energy was seriously blocked on the outside, and they simply could not absorb enough spiritual energy to transform it into magical power, thus they were unable to cultivate. Secondly, it was the so-called five-element spirit root, also known as pseudo-spirit root. This kind of person's filter was somewhat humane, and could accommodate an appropriate amount of spiritual energy into the body. However, during the absorption process, it was completely indiscriminate, resulting in the spiritual energy that entered the body not only being sparse, but also chaotic. Moreover, what was worse was that the composition of the spiritual energy that entered the body was highly random. Different cultivators used different meditation methods to draw spiritual energy into the body at different times and places, and the amount of spiritual energy they obtained would be very different. As a result, when the cultivator carried out the step of transforming spiritual energy into magical power, it would be very difficult to have any efficiency. After that, it was the 4 elements and 3 elements mixed spirit root. Actually, compared to the 5 elements spirit root, their nature was not much different and it was still a mess. However, in the end, it helped the cultivator to get rid of the 2 wrong answers. After drawing spiritual energy into the body, the difficulty of filtering was much lower. In Wang Lu's words, being taken by 3 people was better than being taken by 5 people, right? Later on, it would be easier for a child to recognize his father. However, when it came to the level of dual-element spirit root, the situation was different. When the cultivator's filter could only accommodate 2 kinds of spiritual energy, even if the composition ratio still had a lot of changes and uncertainty, there were a lot more ways to distinguish them. Moreover, many cultivation methods didn't even need to distinguish the attributes, and could naturally transform it into magical power. As a result, the path of cultivation was undoubtedly much smoother, and it was also from this level that the cultivator had the possibility of advancing to enlightened King Pill. And only enlightened King Pill had the qualifications to establish a foothold in the cultivation world. Therefore, dual-element spirit roots and above were also known as true spirit roots. However, dual-element spirit roots could only be ranked 5th among the many grades. This was because the 2 kinds of spiritual energy could complement each other, and naturally, it was better than mutually restraining or having nothing to do with each other. The 5-element spirit roots often had many wonderful uses when drawing spiritual energy into the body. Not only would the cultivator's cultivation progress be faster, but the power of the spells they cast would also be stronger. Further up was the compound spirit root. In fact, it was also a dual-element spirit root, but the compound spirit root's filtering of spiritual energy was more stable, and the 2 elements complemented each other. Generally, it would be a 3rd-grade spirit root. As for the single-element spirit root, generally speaking, the worst one would be an earth spirit root. Not only was the filtered spiritual energy relatively pure, but the permeability of the filter was also very strong. Although it was only one of the 5 elements, the efficiency of drawing spiritual energy was several times better than that of a low-grade spirit root. As for the heavenly spirit root, it was theoretically a flawless spirit root. It could naturally extract extremely pure spiritual energy of a single attribute. As long as it was matched with the appropriate mental cultivation method, the speed of cultivation was simply unimaginable. Of course, mental cultivation methods that could be matched with the heavenly spirit root were also rare. Moreover, after the end of days, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth changed, and the heavenly spirit root might not be as popular as it was during the glorious era. Apart from this, there were also mutated spirit roots. In fact, this was a very general classification. All spirit roots that couldn't be categorized as 5-element spirit roots, as well as spirit roots that were mixed with a special ratio of spiritual energy, resulting in abnormal effects, were all classified as mutated spirit roots. The effects of these spirit roots were varied and difficult to describe in a few words. To a certain extent, Wang Lu's void spirit root was also a mutated spirit root. However, because its grade was too high, it was called the heavenly spirit root. But what was the void spirit root? Since there were only 2 cultivators with the void spirit root in history, and their identities were so special, there weren't many records left. Especially the information about the first emperor, which was mostly myths and legends, with very few credible parts. Today, what people knew was only a little bit of information deduced from the historical materials of great ancestor Desheng. For example, the spiritual energy adaptability was too high, so although it was easy to draw spiritual energy, it couldn't be retained. Thus, great ancestor Desheng spent 10 years in the Kunlun immortal world without any success. And now, Wang Lu was fortunate enough to witness the most special spirit root in the 9 regions for tens of thousands of years, the true appearance of the void spirit root. At the end of the 206 sword bones, a transparent membrane quietly propped up the entire structure of the inner mansion. This was the outer wall of the void spirit root, which was as clear and transparent as glass. The so-called void spirit root probably got its name from this. Generally, spirit roots would have very obvious characteristics. For example, the outer wall of the fire element heavenly spirit root was a group of fire clouds that enveloped the entire sky. In addition to the spiritual energy of the fire element, the rest of the spiritual energy would be isolated from the outside. It was also because of this that when the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect roughly observed Wang Lu and Wang Zhong, he actually missed the qualification of Wang Lu. However, it was impossible to make an accurate judgment based on the appearance alone. Therefore, Wang Lu's slightly resuscitation from the internal vision state and put part of his attention on the outside. Multitasking was the most basic requirement for drawing spiritual energy into the body. Part of the cultivator's energy must be sensitive to the outside world's spiritual energy to absorb and capture it. The other part must stay in the inner mansion to timely preserve the spiritual energy that entered the body. Generally speaking, the cultivator would drive the spiritual energy to circulate in the meridians of the body, so that the spiritual energy would not be lost. After that, the spiritual energy would be compressed to form a spin. Once the spin was formed, the surrounding spiritual energy would continue to seep into the body under the suction force of the whirlpool. Eventually, like a rolling snowball, the cultivator could use this abundant spiritual energy to build his jade mansion. Once the jade mansion was built, the cultivator would have officially entered the foundation establishment stage. For Wang Lu, what he needed to do now was to draw the surrounding spiritual energy into his body, and then, through the observation process, he would understand the uniqueness of the void spirit root. Although he was not in the Spirit Sword Mountain, the spiritual energy in the Spirit Creek town was still very rich. Wang Lu, who had the heavenly spirit root ability since he was a child, could clearly see this. Then there was the absorption. His master didn't write how to do this step, but presumably, it was not because of carelessness, but because she didn't think it was necessary to specifically write it. And Wang Lu naturally understood the method to absorb the spiritual energy with his body. It was very simple, it was to breathe. However, it was different from ordinary breathing. Instead, he had to use the non-phase sword emperor bone as the core to mobilize his whole body's qi and blood, trembling and relaxing to form a suction force on the surrounding spiritual energy. Part of this suction force came from the boundless vitality contained in the non-phase sword emperor bone, and the other part came from the natural characteristic of the void spirit root. When Wang Lu issued the command to the non-phase sword emperor bone, the light in his inner mansion suddenly became more intense. The more than 200 non-phase sword bones began to flicker with the same rhythm, and that layer of transparent membrane also suddenly lit up, following the entire jade mansion. He took a deep breath. In an instant, the freely dissipating spiritual energy around Wang Lu stagnated, and then with Wang Lu as the center, it crazily surged in. So fast. Even though Wang Lu was already prepared, he didn't expect that this one breath would actually attract such a surge of spiritual energy. All the surrounding spiritual energy within a radius of 100 meters seemed to converge in this one breath, forming a stormy sea. Such a situation was extremely dangerous for any cultivator who had just embarked on the road of immortal cultivation. Whether it was the outer wall of the spirit root or the meridians within the body, they had not yet been baptized by the surrounding spiritual energy. If they were suddenly rushed in like this, it was very likely that they would go berserk and explode. The next moment, the huge wave of spiritual energy hit the outer wall. That layer of transparent, clear, and seemingly vulnerable membrane flickered with a platinum brilliance. Under the impact of the spiritual energy, it was as stable as Mount Tai. At the same time, a platinum rain fell in the inner mansion. Wang Lu was stunned for a moment. He realized that this was the highly purified spiritual energy of the void spirit root. It didn't seem to belong to any of the 5 elements, but it looked very powerful. However, without waiting for Wang Lu to look at it, the platinum raindrops evaporated in mid-air, turned into a thick cloud, and then completely dissipated between heaven and earth. The entire process only took 3 to 5 breaths of time. When Wang Lu reacted, the platinum cloud had already completely dissipated. The outer wall of the spirit root also no longer flickered with brilliance, and the surrounding spiritual energy was no different from before. It was as if that deep breath in the inner mansion had never happened. Completely withdrawing his thoughts back to the inner mansion, Wang Lu pondered for a moment, and finally understood the reason. So it was like this. This was the key reason why the void spirit root could not cultivate. The so-called spiritual energy adaptability was actually a misunderstanding. The truth was that after the spiritual energy of heaven and earth had been purified by the outer wall of the void spirit root, it had condensed into an unidentifiable power. This unknown power could not be restrained by any existing means. The moment it entered the body, it would dissipate. If it wasn't the owner of the void spirit root himself, he would only see a huge amount of spiritual energy gushing out, just like walking through a city gate. To use a more realistic and common analogy, it was like a poor boy meeting his mother-in-law, who had no choice but to helplessly buy a house. Thinking of this, Wang Lu couldn't help but feel happy. This void spirit root was simply the mother-in-law's spiritual root. Only the second generation like immortal Qin and great ancestor Dishing, who hugged the thighs of the immortal world, could subdue it. Losers like me really couldn't hope for it. However, according to his master, this non-phase sword bone had the possibility to go against the heaven and change one's fate. But how could it be changed? His master's note stopped here. Obviously, she didn't expect that Wang Lu's cultivation speed would be so fast. In a little more than a month, he had already completed the 8th layer of non-phase sword bone and reached the doorstep of the qi cultivating stage. What should he do now? One way was to wait for his master to come back, and the other way, Wang Lu couldn't help but feel happy. Even that idiot slut could create such a divine skill like non-phase sword bone. How could he, the dignified bookworm, not follow the existing train of thought? In any case, the objective conditions were clear, so he just needed to analyze it. The current situation was that, after the spiritual energy of the void spirit root had been purified by the mother-in-law's spiritual root, it had already transformed into a Ms. Perfect. And if a loser like him wanted to hold hands with her, there was only one way, right? Wang Lu returned to his inner mansion and focused his attention on the 206 indomitable sword bones that pierced the outer wall of the void spirit root. His master designed the non-phase sword bone to look like this. Her intention was actually clear. If he wanted to hold hands with a Ms. Perfect, then force himself on her. Chapter 56. If the outer wall of the void spirit root was like a crafty and harsh mother-in-law, then in a situation where one's own condition could never meet the demand, the only feasible way was to make a private commitment, and then cook the rice. That non-phase sword bone that broke through the sky obviously indicated a straightforward, yet effective path. Force yourself on the bow, using the uncooked rice method. This sounded simple, as if it could be understood with a single thought, but it was based on reverse reasoning. For his master who designed the whole plan, Wang Lu couldn't help but admire her again. Because his master's non-phase sword bone was obviously different from his own. She didn't have the void spirit root, so she didn't need to follow this path. The 206 non-phase sword bones were carefully designed by his master. As his master said, other people's cultivation method was still other people's. Creating one's own cultivation method was the king's way. That being the case, why did she let Wang Lu cultivate the cultivation method that she created? It was very simple, because although the cultivation method that Wang Lu cultivated was called non-phase method, many of the details were tailor-made for him by his master. His master didn't say this, but how could Wang Lu not guess it? Why was it that in the past 2 years, besides running and taking a bath, Wang Lu hadn't been taught a formal cultivation method? Because the formal cultivation method hasn't been designed yet. And why was Wang Lu delayed for 2 years? But he was not anxious and impatient, and was at ease to be a top student. Because he also knew the problem, it was useless to be anxious. Until not long ago, when he vaguely confirmed that his master should have completed the whole set of cultivation method, he began to act. Now, it was time to test the results. Whether his master's painstaking efforts for the past 2 years were effective or not, whether the void spirit root could cultivate, the answer should be revealed. Although it seemed a bit urgent to try to break through now, but there was a naked beauty on the bed shouting for him. Did he have to endure it and go downstairs to buy that umbrella? A real man shouldn't be afraid to raise a child. Eat my shot first. Wang Lu calmed his heart and adjusted the rhythm of his body. Then, under the trembling of the emperor bone, he took a deep breath in his inner mansion. Buzz. A buzzing sound echoed in his ears. The heaven and earth spiritual chi within a radius of 100 meters was drawn in by a strong suction force and hit the transparent membrane. Suddenly, a platinum rain fell from the inner mansion. Wang Lu knew that he only had 2 or 3 breaths of time left, so he immediately ordered the Sword Emperor bone to release even more energy. Even if he had to forcefully pull it, he had to keep the platinum rain in the inner palace. Although the method was a little rough to deal with the combination of the Ms. Perfect and the mother-in-law, forcing himself on them was the correct way. However, after a few breaths, the platinum rain once again evaporated into mist and then disappeared without a trace. Even though the golden jade pillar in the inner mansion was trembling to the point of shattering, it still couldn't stop the other party. Wang Lu was stunned for a moment and shook his head. Of course he couldn't make her stay if he did that. How could it be effective against the combination of the Ms. Perfect and the mother-in-law by simply increasing his strength to inhale? As the saying goes, force yourself on someone, non-phase sword bone, move for me. In Wang Lu's mind, a roar broke out, and the Sword Emperor bone above the inner mansion suddenly burst out in astonishing light. At the same time, the 206 jade pillars rose from the ground, and their sharp tips hit the outer wall of the spiritual root, colliding with the transparent membrane. The first move, force yourself on someone, kill the mother-in-law. Driving the Sword Emperor bone to fiercely rub against the outer wall of the spiritual root, the corner of Wang Lu's mouth raised into a grin. As a professional adventurer, he could be very cruel when he needed to. This move, probably no ordinary cultivator would dare to try, or even dare to think about it. Using the flesh to destroy the outer wall of the spiritual root was simply courting death. However, Wang Lu dared. Not only did he dare to think about it, he even dared to gamble. Because he was very sure that, although his master didn't write it down in the notes, the next step of cultivation was like this, and there was no mistake about it. Based on the tacit understanding between him and her in the past 2 years, their hearts were connected. The battle between the jade pillars and the blue dome of the sky was extremely fierce. The shockwaves surged, causing the mountains in the inner mansion to collapse and the rivers to flow in reverse. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking, and the end of the world was just around the corner. Such a strong impact was reflected in the inner mansion, but outside. At this time, Wang Lu's 7 orifices were overflowing with blood, his meridians were in disorder, and his bones issued a terrifying ka-ka sound. Even though his body had reached the large success realm and his vitality was incomparably exuberant, he still couldn't bear this kind of self-mutilation. In a moment he was seriously injured. If he continued, in just a few seconds he would die. However, at this time, a critical change occurred on the battlefield. The transparent outer wall seemed to have been worn down, and finally gave up resistance, fusing a little bit with the tip of the non-phase sword bone. Success. Wang Lu subconsciously clenched his fist. It was a great success. The so-called kill the mother-in-law was not really to kill her. If she was really dead, then the matter with the girl would be over. And the one who forced himself on the girl was not the girl, but the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law would watch over the girl, but the mother-in-law, would the mother-in-law's mother-in-law jump out? As long as this was done, the mother-in-law would take care of the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law. With Wang Lu's professionalism, how could he make a mistake in such a script? Even if he used his knee to think, he knew that his master absolutely designed it this way. Therefore, although the process was a bit thrilling, the final result proved everything. With the fusion of the non-phase sword bone and the outer wall of the spiritual root, the spiritual energy absorbed from the outside would be filtered into the inner mansion through the fusion of the non-phase sword bone and the outer wall, instead of evaporating after the white golden rain. To put it bluntly, it was actually the same idea as Patriarch Lu He's man-made spirit root. However, the difference was that even the most powerful man-made spirit root in the immortal cultivation world, under the effect of the spiritual root, could not shake the heavenly spirit root, let alone the void spirit root, which was at the top of the spiritual root. However, the non-phase sword bone could do it. This could also be regarded as the counterattack of a loser. After the fusion with the void spirit root, the inner mansion would still absorb a large amount of spiritual energy. Most of it would turn into white golden rain and evaporate, but there was also a considerable part that would directly enter the non-phase sword bone, and after being filtered by the jade pillars, it would flow down to the bottom of the non-phase sword bone as a golden liquid. With Wang Lu's current knowledge, it was not enough to judge the composition of the golden liquid, but presumably, it was an important material for practicing the non-phase method. Since he didn't have the method to practice the non-phase method, he might as well save it for the time being. The 206 jade pillars, although slowly, firmly absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy, and then bit by bit accumulated the golden liquid. Before long it formed a small puddle. Even though it couldn't compare to the platinum rain, this was a power that truly belonged to him. Perhaps the platinum rain was very powerful, but since he couldn't use it, it wasn't worth it. If he had to describe it, this was probably the same as a young, immature love he had with a rich and beautiful classmate when he was still ignorant. The only use was that he could show off to his descendants that he once had such a beautiful relationship when his hair turned gray. Or like Mordred, who used an egg roll to draw a card. Of course, if he looked at things in a positive direction, the situation would not be so sour and bleak. Although the flow of the golden liquid was not fast, it was actually liquid energy, which was one level higher than the gaseous state. In theory, only when a cultivator reached the 5th or 6th level of chi cultivating stage would they be able to use liquid energy. Moreover, they could only liquefy a part of it, unless it was a talented cultivator with heavenly spirit root or earthly spirit root. Secondly, looking at the total amount, the sum of the golden liquid from more than 200 jade pillars was not a small amount. If it was converted according to the ratio of 100 to 1, the absorption speed of 3rd or 4th rank spirit root was about the same. Although it couldn't be compared to those with heavenly spirit root and high-level spirit root, it was still acceptable. Moreover, this sword bone filtration also had another advantage. When it absorbed the spiritual energy, it was equivalent to the non-phase sword bone being tempered. Because the entrance was the fusion of the sword bone and the void spirit root, it was actually equivalent to directly pressing the white golden rain into the sword bone, and after being transformed by the sword bone, the golden liquid flowed out. Of course, looking at it this way, this golden liquid seemed to be the excrement of the sword bone. But in any case, it was his own thing, so he didn't care about it. Then this situation was actually just the beginning. With the continuous improvement of the non-phase sword bone, the synchronization rate with the void spirit root would also increase. When the time came, the absorption efficiency would also increase. In the end, he feared that the white golden rain would be absorbed and filtered by the sword bone, turning into a golden ocean. In any case, as the first step on the road of immortal cultivation, Wang Lu had no regrets. Therefore, with a faint smile on his face, he loudly fell down. "Are you really a fool? Fuck." The next morning, when he opened his eyes, he saw the lady boss sitting in front of the window with an unhappy expression. She was taking a towel off his forehead, soaking it in the basin of water beside her, and then putting it back. "In the middle of the night, is it fun to hide in the room and quietly risk your life to pass the test? Since you asked me to be your protector, then you should let me protect you until the end. Instead, you avoided me at the most critical time. What the hell is going on in your head? Moreover, if you want to pass the test, why didn't you pick a good place? Look, your blood is all over the bedsheet. If other people see it, they would think that I did something to you yesterday." The lady boss grumpily complained and then cursed, "You're really the same as your master, a bastard." At this time, Wang Lu only felt that his mouth was dry and his whole body was in severe pain. But after listening to these words, he still struggled to defend himself. "I have more moral than her." *CK. The lady boss's hand trembled, and she couldn't help but overturn the basin of water. "You're the pot calling the kettle black." Wang Lu happily closed his eyes. "One step less, that's still one step less. I really have nothing to say to you too." Wang Lu reluctantly smiled and asked, "This injury, how long will it take for it to heal? Will it delay tomorrow's experiential learning?" The lady boss said, "With your physique, it should be fine by tomorrow morning. In fact, although it looks serious, it's not fatal. Your luck is really good. Moreover, you've cultivated the 8th layer of the sword bone, so your recovery ability has become a lot stronger." "That's good. What's good about that?" The lady boss suddenly became angry. "Do you know how dangerous it was yesterday? When I noticed the abnormality, you were only a hair's breadth away from a fatal wound. I don't have any life-saving medicine here, so I may not be able to send you back to the mountain in time to find someone to save your life. Don't you always boast that you're a professional adventurer? An adventurer without a life is just a pile of dead meat, do you know that? Actually, yesterday's situation was completely under control. What control?" Being rebuked by Wang Lu, the lady boss became even angrier. She simply ignored the other party's injured status and punched him in the chest. Her strength was so exquisite that Wang Lu wanted to vomit blood, but he couldn't. "These past 2 years in the Spirit Sword Mountain have been smooth. Do you really think that you're the heaven's favored one, omnipotent? There are at least 100 people like you who die every year in the 9 regions." Wang Lu continued to struggle to defend himself. Considering the vast territory of the 9 regions and the large population, the mortality rate is actually... "Shut up. The lady boss was really angry. Do you think risking your life is fun? Do you think that the greater the risk, the greater the reward? Only the second half of the sentence is effective to you, right? Do you think that as long as you're a genius, you can face any difficulty without any mishap? Let me tell you, in the golden generation of the Lingzhen school, none of the top people are inferior to you. Later on, the Heavenly Sword Hall at that time was hot-headed and launched a management trainee program. They sent their best 100 disciples to the savage land to open up a colony. Guess what happened? The lady boss's barrage of questions made it difficult for Wang Lu to respond. Especially the management trainee program, which was a taboo topic in the sect. Even his master, who was a lawless character, once this topic was mentioned, would immediately turn gloomy and become silent. It was like a scar that was engraved on all the elders of Spirit Sword sect, which could not be healed even after 100 years. Wang Lu was curious about this, but he also knew that this was not a good time to speak, so he patiently listened. The lady boss was not asking him a question, but a rhetorical question. Soon she revealed the answer herself. The result is, out of the 100 talented disciples, only these 10 people of Heavenly Sword Hall are left. Guess what is the status of these 10 people in the past? When it came to this, even if Wang Lu thought with his knees, he already knew the answer. And sure enough, even the most talented one, Feng Yin, was only above average among the 100 people, far from the top few. As for Lu Xian, Zhou Ming and the others, not to mention them. Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. According to your ranking, doesn't that mean my talent is far above the current sect leader? Haha, that's really gratifying. *CK. That's not the point, okay? The lady boss gritted her teeth and rubbed her fists, eager to smash Wang Lu's head. I know. Wang Lu finally sighed. I'm really sorry for making you worry about me. The lady boss didn't expect Wang Lu to admit defeat so quickly. Hearing his apology, she was caught unprepared. Stunned, she said, Well, there's nothing to be sorry about. I'm not particularly worried about you, I just think. While at a loss, the lady boss's face also changed. However, before Wang Lu had the time to observe, she picked up the basin. Forget it, I don't want to talk nonsense with you, I'm going to open the door to do my business. TSK, are you going to open your daily turnover of more than 10,000 again? None of your business. Go and heal your injury. Chapter 57. The 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone was marvelous beyond words. Early the next morning, Wang Lu's injury was completely healed. Then, under the horrified and indignant gaze of the lady boss, he forcefully ate the inn's 3 days' worth of food, causing a heavy loss. Of course, for someone with an average daily turnover of more than 10,000, this was nothing. Therefore, the lady boss had no choice but to swallow her pride and accept it. After a breakfast that was enough to make Wen Bao feel ashamed and indignant, Wang Lu patted his still flat abdomen and stretched his muscles and bones. He faintly felt that although the 8th layer of the non-phase sword bone had a higher recovery ability, it seemed to come at a great price. Since his injury was healed, there was no need to change the original plan. Inside the Spirit Sword Mountain, outside the Clear Sky Peak, Wang Lu looked at his 2 teammates who had arrived on time and asked, So, we're all here, do we still need to take attendance? The lady boss was very impatient. There are only 3 people who don't know each other. Are you crazy? Why do you need to take attendance? Wang Lu said with a smile, Well, the main problem is this. With that, he took out a golden document from his bosom. This is the entrance permit issued by the Heavenly Policy Hall. You also know that the Clear Sky Peak is the sect's most important resource. Even I, a successor disciple, can't freely enter and exit, let alone people outside the mountain. Therefore, 2 days ago I specifically found this document for you, but it needs to be written with the user's name, that. Speaking to this, Wang Lu stopped talking. After all, they had known each other for 2 years and 3 months, but he didn't even know the other's full name. This friend was too much. However, he couldn't blame Wang Lu. The identity of the lady boss was a taboo in the Lingzhen school, so Wang Lu didn't deliberately inquire about it. Most of the time they only got along with each other in 2 or 3 people, so they rarely directly called each other by name. When they called her, it was mostly, Lady boss, shop owner, waiter, beauty, what the hell you dare to hit me, you wild monkey. The only thing he knew was that his master, Wang Wu, called her Little Ling Er. There were so many characters in her name, but as for her surname, he couldn't just give her his surname just because she was familiar with him, right? Wang Xiaoling? *CK what's with this damn counterfeit smell? Therefore, when there was a rare opportunity, Wang Lu wanted to use this pass to trick her into revealing her real name. By the way, beauty, there's a problem here. You need to sign your real name on the permit for it to take effect. This is a sincerity paper, so Wang Lu's probing could be said to be unscrupulous. In any case, considering the lady boss's level of IQ development and the thickness of her nerves, she should not be able to detect it. However, the lady boss looked at the golden paper and shrugged indifferently. Then help me write Ling. Wang Lu frowned. Just the word Ling? What about your surname? Sorry, there were many mistakes in the past. In fact, it is the bell beside the golden character. Please take this as the standard. Thank you. The lady boss sneered. I don't have a surname. Awesome, right? Impressive, but are you sure this is your real name? If you ruin this piece of paper, it'll be useless. I won't be able to find a second one in a short time. Don't worry. I'm different from your master. I won't cheat you. Wang Lu had no choice but to write a single character Ling on it. However, no matter how he looked at it, he felt awkward. This name without a surname really didn't look like a person from a civilized society. It was more like a pet like De Huang or Ah Mao. Speaking of which, was it okay for the lady boss to be so realistic? She didn't want this precious sincerity paper to be useless. With a trace of uncertainty, Wang Lu filled in the sincerity paper and handed it to the lady boss. He thought to himself that this could be considered as a dog tag. Then the lady boss took the dog tag or sincerity paper without looking at it, put it in her bosom and strode forward. Outside the blue sky peak, there was a prohibition jointly set up by the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Without a specific document, no one could pass. Even the elders themselves were no exception. Otherwise, the fifth elder wouldn't have had to go through so much trouble to enter the mountain to plunder. Following behind the lady boss, Wang Lu watched her casually pass through the prohibition of the blue sky peak. Inwardly, he couldn't help but be startled. Oh my god, lady boss, are you really a single character? This kind of pet naming really doesn't match your peerless master identity. You might as well just follow my surname and be called Wang Xiaoling. Following behind little Ling Er, Wang Lu was the second to enter the mountain. It was just that, when he passed through the prohibition, he vaguely felt something strange. Is it an illusion? It's like I'm being watched. After successfully drawing the spiritual energy into his body, due to his excellent spirit root, Wang Lu was exceptionally sensitive to the change in the surrounding spiritual energy. He couldn't help but look up, but all he saw was the clear sky. How could he see the truth through the hole in the sky? In the sky above the Spirit Sword Mountain, 3 elderly cultivators were standing on a cloud, looking at the far east. And in the east, a green cloud that seemed slow but was actually fast was rapidly approaching. Looking at the distant cloud, the leading cultivator slowly nodded. 7th Junior Brother, after 3 years on this long journey, the harvest is quite plentiful. The cultivator on the right also praised, not bad. Just this simple flying cloud technique has already shown the aura of a grandmaster. Presumably, at this time, his 7-colored yuanying has already reached the peak yuanying stage. The leading cultivator said, with 7th Junior Brother's talent and perception, if it was 100 years ago, I'm afraid no one could have predicted that he would have today's achievement. The cultivator on the right said, 100 years ago? I still remember that at that time, someone said that even if he was imparted with the help of ***, he would only reach the king pill and would never reach the yuanying stage. But, at that time, who could have predicted today's situation? The cultivator on the left laughed. 100 years ago, except for sect leader Senior Brother, none of us were favored by anyone. It's just that, when it came to the past, the 3 of them had endless emotions. However, before long, the green cloud had already approached the Spirit Sword Mountain. After slightly touching the cloud and mist great array that guarded the mountain gate, the green cloud and the cloud and mist great array merged together. The green cloud dissipated, and a tall and burly cultivator in a black robe, whose face was hidden in the hood, stepped on the void and arrived in front of the 3 people. Although his appearance seemed a bit mysterious, when he opened his mouth, he let out a straightforward and heroic laugh. Sect leader Senior Brother Lucien, Senior Brother Fang He. It's actually the 3 of you waiting for me here, it's really a shame. Seeing him, Lucien's face couldn't help but burst into a smile. If it weren't for 4th Junior Brother and 6th Junior Brother going out, we would have come together. 9th Junior Sister is preparing a welcoming banquet for you. Rest assured, according to your request, it's not too grand. But martial brothers and sisters always have to get together. Even the always simple and upright disciplinary elder Fang He, with a gentle face, said, yes, Junior Brother has been wandering the world for 3 years, going to the western continent and the eastern border. Presumably you've gained a lot, so you must tell us about it. After exchanging a few words of greeting, the several martial brothers didn't hurry to enter the mountain. Instead they stopped in midair and talked. Some words could only be passed between the few of them here. Sect leader Feng Yin Taoist master earnestly asked, "Seventh junior brother, this time when you went to the western continent, did you find your family?" The seventh elder shook his head. "There's no clue at all, but I'm already mentally prepared, so it's nothing. After all, it's very difficult for a small tribe like that to survive for more than 50 years, and I've been away from my hometown for more than 150 years. But this time when I went back I still saw a lot of my people, they..." Speaking to this point, the seventh elder stopped. After a while, with some regret and some sadness, he said, "Their living conditions are very bad. No matter where I go, what I see is almost the same. Poverty, ignorance, panic. Although in this kind of hardship, some heroes will be born, but without good luck, no matter how talented they are, they still can't grow up. Not everyone can be like me, lucky enough to meet Master, lucky enough to meet several martial brothers. I tried to help them, but the strength of one person is really insignificant. At most, I can only help them avoid some natural and man-made disasters, or give them 1 or 2 years of harvest to fill their stomachs. These are just small tricks that treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Even so, many times people still call me a prophet, a savior. I really can't shoulder such a heavy burden." Hearing this heavy topic, the mood of the several martial brothers was somewhat depressed. How many helpless things were there in the world? Every time they went down the mountain to wander, they would more or less encounter regrets. Even if they were peak Yuanying stage-old monsters, how could everything go according to their wishes? In the midst of the depressing atmosphere, the second elder, Lu Xian, suddenly sighed and shook his head. He took out a miniature bonsai from his sleeve and said to the seventh elder, "Junior brother, since you have returned, I will return the Clear Sky Peak's forbidden technique to you." The seventh elder received the bonsai and also put down the heavy burden in his heart. He smiled and said, "Thank you, senior brother, for helping me look after the Clear Sky Peak for 3 years. Later I will treat you to a drink." Lu Xian angrily said, "Speaking of this, I am ashamed. Junior brother, you entrusted the Clear Sky Peak to me, but I couldn't take care of it. How could I have the face to drink your wine?" Haha, fifth senior sister's matter? It's not a big deal. In any case, it's just picking some fruits in the small Clear Sky Peak. Senior brother doesn't need to worry about it. While he was talking, the bonsai in the seventh elder's hand suddenly shook. This Clear Sky Peak master gawked. "Hey, someone broke the Clear Sky Peak's forbidden technique?" Thereupon, his eyes moved down to overlook the ground. In a split second, a panoramic view of the 12 peaks of the Spirit Sword sect could be seen, including the 3 people in front of the Clear Sky Peak. After seeing the 3 people, the seventh elder was even more surprised. Little Ling Heir? What little Ling Heir? This time even the sect leader was alarmed. He hurriedly looked down and frowned. What's wrong with this child? She's simply messing around. The seventh elder gawked. Senior brother, why do you say that? I'm just curious why little Ling Heir would come to the mountain. Moreover, she came to my Clear Sky Peak. She didn't do anything. She just broke my forbidden technique, but she can restore it in an instant. Feng Yin Taoist master shook his head. Of course, little Ling Heir can't do anything by herself, but look at the people around her. Humph, that brat Wang Lu is really smart. He actually pulled little Ling Heir to do this kind of shady business. The seventh elder was even more baffled. Wang Lu? Is he the peerless genius that senior brother mentioned in your letter? What's wrong with him? What shady business? Your Clear Sky Peak has been ruined by him. You see, not only did he pick the red refined fruit, he also didn't let the wailing ghost vine go. He's simply a robber. The seventh elder looked down at the 3 people who had just entered the mountain. They were still behaving themselves. He then looked at his indignant senior brother and thought, how come I didn't see anything? Feng, he explained, junior brother, you might not know this, but after practicing the stellar diffraction technique for so many years, senior brother's spirit eyes have become more and more brilliant. It's just that, before reaching the great success stage, there will inevitably be some side effects. The seventh elder wondered, side effects are? Feng, he pointed at the pair of glasses that Feng Yin was holding. If you don't wear the Kunlun mirror, the world in senior brother's eyes will be full of all kinds of possibilities, the illusion of probability. In other words, what he sees is not the present, but the future. But there are too many possibilities in the future and he can't be sure which one it is, so. Lu Xian sighed. To put it bluntly, maybe you are standing here, but in senior brother's eyes, there is a row of 7th junior brothers. Moreover, he is also discussing all kinds of topics with him in all kinds of ways. So even though little Ling Er and the others have just entered the mountain, senior brother can already see what might happen after entering the mountain. Why do you want to practice this kind of evil cultivation method? Evil? Junior brother, think about it carefully. If this cultivation method reaches the great success stage, and senior brother can see the future with absolute accuracy, what will happen? When others fight with him before they even make a move, he has already thought of a countermeasure. How can he fight like this? And if it is combined with the stellar diffraction technique, the effect of this foresight ability will be even more terrifying. For example, if the other party uses a spell that has never been heard of, even if you know in advance, you won't know how to deal with it. But senior brother can use the stellar diffraction technique and stellar spiritual eyes to simulate and calculate countless plans in his mind, and then use his foresight ability to test them one by one and choose the most effective one. Hearing this, the 7th elder was incomparably shocked. Isn't this invincible in the world? Even if the legendary true immortals descended to the world, they still wouldn't be able to do anything to the omniscient and omnipotent senior brother, right? Feng Yin himself sighed. How can it be so easy to reach the great success stage? I have cultivated this cultivation method for 10 years, but I can't even be considered to have reached the minor success stage. In the end, I don't have the talent in this area, so I have to work twice for half the results. The reason why I cultivate this cultivation method is actually because of Yao Er. Her aptitude is unparalleled in the world, and she is a good material for cultivating this cultivation method. Hearing this, Lucien couldn't help but laugh. Senior brother, you are boasting again. Although Yao Er's aptitude is extraordinary, compared to Brilliant Peak's little Lu Li, it doesn't seem to be much better. Not to mention, as long as one's aptitude is above the 3rd grade, the real deciding factor is not the spirit root, but the opportunity. Moreover, even if you only look at the spirit root with Wang Lu's void spirit root, your family's Yao Er may not necessarily be number 1 in the world. Just now, I saw that Wang Lu has already successfully passed the stage of drawing spiritual energy into his body. With his void spirit root's aptitude, his future is really limitless. Feng Yin snorted. Following such a master, I'm afraid that his lower limit is limitless. Damn, he actually broke through the minor and minor clear sky realms? While Feng Yin Taoist master was making a fuss about nothing, Wang Lu and the other two were still slowly walking on the path into the mountain. Chapter 58. Wang Lu, Little Ling Er and Wen Bao entered the small clear sky peak and then went straight to the Azure Dragon Gorge without any reluctance. Because of the last experiential learning challenge, they had obtained almost all the challenge points that they could get. The challenge points were not counted repeatedly, so even if they opened the unparalleled mode again, it would be meaningless. Not to mention with the Lady Boss's peerless external help, it was simply impossible to get challenge points. Therefore, the purpose of this trip was very clear. The first was to consolidate his cultivation through actual combat. With the completion of the 8th layer of sword bone and the success of drawing spiritual energy into his body, Wang Lu had already stood on a brand new level. However, before he could continue, he had to further consolidate his foundation. The best way to consolidate his foundation was through actual combat, and the best opponent for actual combat was the large number of 3rd-rank monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge. Only this level of opponent could really give Wang Lu some experiential learning. Secondly, there were several precious spirit herbs in the Azure Dragon Gorge. Among them, the red refined fruit was a must-pick, as well as golden thread grass, bitter ghost vine, flesh lingji. If he could pick them, Wang Lu didn't want to miss them. Perhaps the herbs in the small clear sky peak were not that valuable in the eyes of peak Yuanying stage elders, but for the master and disciple who were accustomed to hardship on the non-phase peak, it was a huge sum of money that could not be missed. Along the way there was no surprise nor danger. After only half a day, the Azure Dragon Gorge was already in front of them. The lady boss was a bit surprised. You two, the small clear sky peak is a big challenge for the young disciples of the Lingjian school, but you two don't seem to be struggling at all. Especially you, dead fatty, I didn't know you could run so well. Wen Bao gasped for breath and smiled wryly. Of course I can run. The last time he challenged his senior brother, he survived for a week in the Azure Dragon Gorge. In the last 2 days he simply ran. Although he didn't lose a few pounds of fat, his physical strength had greatly improved. Wang Lu indifferently said, "This is the 3rd time, it's not strange to walk a bit faster." However, after entering the Azure Dragon Gorge, the road is not so easy to walk, so I still have to count on Sister Ling's help. As he said this, he bowed to the lady boss seriously. Little Ling Er wrinkled her nose uncomfortably. I always feel that you don't have any good intentions. Also, don't expect too much from me. I'm just a martial artist in the mortal world. I can't compare to your master, who is a Taoist master, King Pill. It's impossible for me to bring you around here. Sister Ling is too humble. Humph, you can think whatever you want, but if you really encounter danger, don't just rely on me to save you. Otherwise, I can only offer you some incense at most. As they spoke, the three of them stepped into the Azure Dragon Gorge. As soon as they entered the gorge, a gloomy aura enveloped their surroundings. Little Ling Er shook her head and said, "What's going on? Why is there such a strong hostility? It's as if I'm the target of everyone." Logically speaking, the monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge are all nerds. As long as we don't invade their territory, they won't be very aggressive. Wang Lu chuckled and said, "Maybe it's because they're in heat, so they're more violent." But in his heart he thought, "That's because you don't know that more than a week ago, in order to earn challenge points, when Bao and I put laxatives upstream of an important water source in the Azure Dragon Gorge and cheated the achievement of 10,000 Beast Stampede. We earned more than 500 challenge points and successfully angered a large number of monsters." Little Ling Er didn't pursue the matter further. "Forget it. Since I've accompanied you here, I don't expect this road to be easy. You lead the way in front and I'll look after you from the back. Fatty at the back, you should also pay attention. Since Wang Lu has brought you along, please do your best." When Bao held the dark steel heavy sword in his arms, which had obviously become thicker after being strengthened and forged, and nodded vigorously. Then Wang Lu led the way and went deeper into the gorge along the entrance. However, when they were only halfway there, a strong aura of monsters appeared on the mountain rocks above them. The smell. Is it Little Thunder? Wang Lu raised his head. Sure enough, between the mountain walls, a 2-meter-long golden ferocious beast was baring its teeth at him. More than a month ago, Little Thunder, which had been living leisurely in the Azure Dragon Gorge, was broken into its home by a pair of cruel master and disciple. They took away the spirit herbs it used to decorate its cave, broke its 2 legs and broke its thunder magic. 2 weeks ago, that damned disciple, who took the side of the evildoer, violently broke into its home again with a fatty, took away the remaining spirit herbs and seriously injured it. Fortunately, a few days ago, a thunderstorm completely healed its injuries. Now that it smelled its enemy, it immediately rushed to the gorge to take revenge. The strength of that villain was not strong. Although it was seriously injured last time, it could have bitten him to death. Unfortunately, the other party used a crafty plot and smeared a strong poison on its body that it had never seen before. That was why it failed on the verge of success. This time it would not give him a chance to carry out his plot, and it would directly kill him with thunder magic. Little Thunder opened its mouth, and a spear-like thunder light directly pierced towards Wang Lu's throat. It was so fast that no one could react. However, Wang Lu seemed to have predicted it. The moment he saw Little Thunder, he raised his right hand in front of him to block it. His movement was even faster than Little Thunder's mouth. The next moment, the thunder light pierced through, but it was completely blocked by Wang Lu's right hand. The thunder light splashed and countless tiny electric snakes struggled to disperse in the air. It only left a little scorch mark on Wang Lu's palm, but after a while, even the scorch mark disappeared. Little Thunder was immediately startled by this magical right hand. Although it was only a tentative attack, the lightning just now was enough to kill a middle-grade rank 2 monster. Even a high-grade stone wood ape with a powerful defense couldn't block the lightning so easily. It had only been a week since they last met. How could this human have changed so much? Unfortunately, although Little Thunder was cunning, it was not a monster that was good at thinking. Its doubts were soon drowned out by anger. The little thing opened its mouth wide and accumulated even more energy. Its innate superpower quickly created countless electric snakes. Even if it was dozens of meters away, it could still make people's skin tingle. The destructive power was not proportional to its size. This was one of the 2 trump cards of a small monster like Little Thunder in the Azure Dragon Gorge. As for the other card, just as the Little Thunder was about to charge up its energy and burst out an unprecedentedly intense lightning, this little thing's strong and powerful legs fiercely kicked the ground and flew into the air. The next moment, a thick lightning fell from the sky, and just like a divine tribulation, it covered Wang Lu. This was its second trump card, the change of direction attack. Although it was simply combined with the astonishing explosive power of its hind legs, the actual combat effect was very good. Many monsters, and even the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect who came to the mountain for experiential learning, would be caught off guard and injured by this thunderbolt attack. Senior brother, be careful. The fatty's exclamation came a bit late. When he tried to warn his senior brother, Little Thunder's thunder beam had already pierced through the air, causing gravel to fly everywhere and dust to fly everywhere. However, the fatty clearly saw that Wang Lu was right in the middle of the lightning pillar, hitting him head-on. Senior brother? The fatty was simply scared out of his wits. That thunder strike just now was not worse than the thunder palm strike of the several low-level foundation establishment senior brothers. Senior brother Wang Lu had just started cultivating qi, so no matter how strong his body was, it was still limited. Moreover, he was caught off guard, so how could he block it? Senior brother, oh senior brother, you're too careless. No matter how much your cultivation base has advanced, you're still in the qi cultivating stage. In the Azure Dragon Gorge you must be careful. As a professional adventurer, you've reminded others countless times, but how could you be so careless when it's your turn? As for the indifferent lady boss, what kind of bodyguard are you? You actually let Wang Lu be in danger? Moreover, you even have a smile on your face? What's so funny? At the same time, Little Thunder had already used its 2 trump cards. When it landed, it was already somewhat out of breath. However, seeing the dust flying behind it, it proudly wagged its tail. Let alone a qi cultivating stage cultivator, even a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator would be seriously injured if they were not careful. At this time, the enemy had probably been smashed into pieces. However, when the dust settled, a horrifying scene came into Little Thunder's eyes. Wang Lu's right hand was raised high, and his palm was badly mutilated and charred by the thunder pillar. However, at the same time, his flesh was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a few seconds, the charred skin and rotten flesh fell off by themselves and new tissue grew back. The thunder strike, which was enough to turn an ordinary level 2 monster into charcoal powder, could only cause such insignificant damage. It couldn't even penetrate his bones? What's worse was that this guy's reaction speed was too fast. He could actually keep up with its rapid change of direction? In fact, Wang Lu certainly couldn't keep up, but for him he didn't need to. After completing the 8th layer of the sword bone and fusing the jade pillar with the outer wall of the spirit root, he was extremely sensitive to the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. As a level 3 monster, Little Thunder would make a lot of confusing movements before attacking, such as suddenly baring its teeth, glaring and shaking its legs to disrupt the opponent's judgment and rhythm. However, no matter how it acted, the spiritual energy whirlpool created by its demonic power wouldn't lie. In Wang Lu's eyes, Little Thunder was like a magician who had been betrayed by a hired shill. It was trying its best to entertain itself, but it didn't know that its underwear had been seen by others. Therefore, it didn't matter if you believed it or not, it was easy for Wang Lu to block this kind of attack. As for the damage caused by the thunder, it was indeed a bit terrifying. It was worthy of being called a low-level 3 monster. If an ordinary qi cultivating stage cultivator was hit by the thunder pillar, half of their body would be burnt. Even a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator wouldn't casually resist it. However, for Wang Lu, this damage was only enough to make him slightly frown, it was simply not enough to hurt his muscles and bones. Because this non-phase sword bone had another advantage. In addition to the increase in the defensibility of the copper skin and iron bone, Wang Lu could clearly feel that his body now had a strong resistance to lightning, fire, ice, and other special attribute attacks. In the professional term of an adventurer, it was high resistance. In addition to the substantial increase in his armor and health, the non-phase sword bone's resistance was quite amazing. If Little Thunder used its claws to bite, perhaps it could hurt his muscles and bones. However, its best skill, the thunder strike, was instead restrained by Wang Lu. However, since the super spicy mustard sauce, Little Thunder's fear of biting Wang Lu had already penetrated deep into its bones, so it didn't dare to try it again. Therefore, after hesitating for a moment, this fierce monster decided to retreat first, not wanting to fight with this humanoid freak. On the other side, sensing that the other party wanted to leave, Wang Lu took a step forward, trying to chase after it. Unfortunately, the non-phase sword bone was good, but it didn't have the speed bonus. When Wang Lu took a step forward, Little Thunder had already turned around and ran dozens of meters away. With one kick, it jumped up the mountain, and its figure was about to disappear among the jagged rocks on the cliff. Whether it was Wang Lu or Wen Bao, after running a few steps, they didn't even have the qualification to eat the dust. However, although Wang Lu couldn't stop Little Thunder, there was someone else who could. "TSK wanna run?" The girl, who had been silent all this time, suddenly sneered. Her hand shook and a piece of gravel flew out like a meteor. Like a cultivator's flying sword, it was fast and accurate. It hit right in between Little Thunder's legs. With a crisp sound of chicken flying and eggs being smashed, that lightning monster fell down from the mountain without making a sound. Instant second. It was actually instant second. Although Little Thunder wasn't known for its physical strength, it was still a third-level monster. No matter how weak it was, it still had copper skin and iron bones. An ordinary innate master might not be able to cause any serious damage even with a weapon in their hands. But the lady boss only used a stone to kill it in one blow. Seeing this hidden weapon technique that could instantly kill a level 3 monster, the faces of the two men nearby turned pale. Wen Bao was even more scared, constantly hiding behind Wang Lu. Wang Lu inwardly cursed, "You can hide once, but can you hide forever?" In the face of this shameless female devil, the only countermeasure is to obediently kneel down and lick her, okay? But then again, he didn't know if there was a special training for the non-phase sword bone later on. Although his master was a female creature, she should also cherish her lower body, right? As the main culprit, the lady boss seemed to be completely unaware of the shocking evil she had just done. She turned around and looked at Wang Lu and Wen Bao. "What are you guys doing? Let's go." Looking at the lady boss, Wang Lu suddenly felt how insignificant his so-called diamond body was. Chapter 59. After the lady boss killed Little Thunder with her stone, the three of them continued to move forward. Still led by Wang Lu, their destination was still the depths of the Azure Dragon Gorge. Along the way they encountered a number of large and small battles. Today the monsters in the Azure Dragon Gorge became particularly aggressive. They constantly appeared in front of the three people, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws to block their way. This made the lady boss sigh with emotion. Recently the weather had been abnormal, and the monsters seemed to be in heat earlier than usual. What she didn't know was that more than a week ago, the amount of laxative that Wang Lu and Wen Bao put in the Azure Dragon Pond was too large, which had a bad impact on the ecological environment here. Most of the monsters that appeared were of the third rank, which was similar to Little Thunder, so they didn't pose too much of a threat. Occasionally there were some that were close to the middle rank. However, although the battle was fierce with the help of the egg-bursting demon, it was more daunting than dangerous. Through these dozens of large and small battles, Wang Lu's understanding of the non-phase sword bone became more and more profound, and at the same time he was even more impressed by the vastness and profoundness of this method. It was indeed a top-notch method in terms of adaptability and expansibility. Currently, Wang Lu didn't have the method to cultivate the 9th layer of the non-phase sword bone, nor did he have anyone to guide him on the application of the non-phase sword bone. However, just by exploring it in actual combat he was able to dig out a lot of tricks. For example, the more than 200 sword bones in his body could be driven by the Emperor Bone during the battle. Through internal breathing he could distribute the power and strengthen the individual sword bones. After mastering this skill, if he encountered Little Thunder's lightning strike again, he could still use his hand to block it. If he strengthened the defense of his hand in advance, the damage he received could be further reduced, avoiding the pain of being badly mutilated. In addition, if he encountered some monsters that were good at confusing the mind, he could also use the independence of the Emperor Bone to produce a strong pain at the critical moment, stimulating the body to restore its mind. And if he continued to dig, there would obviously be more wonderful uses, such as stimulating the body to produce a stronger explosive force and so on. There were too many similar skills. Even with Wang Lu's high perception, he could only initially grasp the outline. Further exploration would take a long time. Even so, as a new cultivator who had just stepped into the Qi cultivating stage, Wang Lu's smooth journey through the Azure Dragon Gorge could be said to be a miracle. In addition to Wang Lu's outstanding performance, the fatty was not just a bystander. Wang Lu brought him into the mountain. On one hand, as the leader, Wang Lu had to lead the team so that the fatty, who was seriously lacking in motivation, could keep up with him. On the other hand, his black iron sword technique was actually very useful. Occasionally, in the Azure Dragon Gorge, they would come across those with huge bodies and thick shells that were difficult to kill. It was Fatty's turn to take action. The black iron sword that was filled with anger slashed down. At the very least, it could cut open a crack. After a week of challenging experience, Wang Lu was not the only one who gained a lot. Wen Bao had also made a breakthrough in the endless challenges. He had reached the upper stage of the 8th stage of Qi refining stage, and his dark steel sword art had reached the 8th stage in one fell swoop. His attack power was not inferior to that of his senior brother who was at the upper stage of Qi refining stage. It was not easy to kill a Class 3 monster in one blow, but with the help of the characteristics of the Black Iron Sword, it was more than enough to break its defense. And as long as the fatty broke its defense, a certain egg-popping demon Little Ling Air's hidden weapon could easily kill any sexually reproducing monster without any exception. The three-person team cooperated happily all the way, killing with irresistible force. Wen Bao secretly made a calculation and was surprised to find that although this time, they didn't deliberately look for trouble with the monsters, the number of monsters they had killed along the way was actually more than the last time they challenged the experiential learning. Of course, this was inseparable from the addition of a certain egg-popping demon, but the great progress of Wang Lu and Wen Bao could also be seen. The fatty couldn't help but sigh with emotion. If Junior Sister you could see this scene, how great would it be? The reason why he went against his nature and followed Wang Lu to the small clear sky peak to fight for his life, wasn't it so that he could straighten his back in front of his confidant? But then again, if Yu Xinyao really followed them with Wen Bao's psychological endurance, he feared that he would be at a loss and want to pee. They walked for more than half a day, and when the evening light shone into the Azure Dragon Gorge, the three of them passed through the long and narrow entrance of the gorge and entered an open area, which was the hinterland of the Azure Dragon Gorge. Wang Lu identified the surrounding position and found that after a thunderstorm a few days ago, the nearby terrain had changed a lot. Fortunately, it was not difficult for him, a bookworm. Soon, he identified the path and killed his way to the place where the red refined fruit grew. Speaking of which, the last time he found the red refined fruit in this hinterland, there was too much luck involved. Because according to the records of professional herbology, the red refined fruit would not grow here. The spiritual energy in this area was not rich enough. The few mature red refined fruits in the trees were tantamount to a miracle of life, making people sigh with emotion at the magic of nature. Therefore, according to the old saying in the immortal cultivation world, if you don't take what the heaven gives you, you will be punished. Wang Lu had long regarded the red refined fruit as something in his pocket. The only problem was the golden-lined scarlet snake that was guarding the red refined fruit. More than a week ago, that golden-lined scarlet snake forced Wang Lu, this kind of high-end character, to return with hatred. However, after a week, not only did Wang Lu and Wen Bao's strength greatly improve, there was also a powerful boss in the team. Wang Lu's victory was already in his grasp. Sister Ling, it's that bush in front of us. Inside there is a golden-lined scarlet snake, a level 3 low-rank golden-lined scarlet snake. With the three of us working together, it won't be difficult to deal with it. Are you sure? Little Ling Air was not as relaxed as Wang Lu. Her pair of delicate eyebrows slightly wrinkled. I don't think it's that easy. Wang Lu was silent for a moment. I can understand Sister Ling's feelings. According to the rhythm of the plot, this place is obviously an old monster, but our team is also a brainless team, right? The boss sighed. I feel that the red refined fruit that grows here is not that easy to pick. But since you are so confident, then open it. Wang Lu was certainly confident, not in his own 8th layer sword bone, but in the boss's full confidence. Although the old lady had only used one kind of exploding egg technique along the way, Wang Lu still couldn't forget the domineering power she showed when she sent his master, Wang Wu, flying with a single punch. With this kind of god-level character as the leader, what was there to worry about? Therefore, he very generously stepped into the thicket, but just as his feet were about to touch the ground, an unprecedented sense of crisis hit him in the face. The 206 sword bones in his inner mansion all trembled, driving Wang Lu to step sideways and twist his body without any hesitation. He took a twisted posture that would make even jugglers feel ashamed of their inferiority, and displayed the amazing dodging ability of the winding step at close range to the extreme. Then he barely dodged that life-threatening golden light. After withdrawing from the thicket in 3 consecutive steps, Wang Lu's back was already soaked in cold sweat. Just now, when he urgently dodged, he could clearly see that the golden light brushed past him and went straight to a distant mountain wall. The hard rock was cut by the golden light as if it was cutting through tofu, causing rocks to tumble down. What the hell was that thing? Although it was an old monster but a level 3 monster, was it really that strong? It shouldn't be. More than 2 years ago, during the Immortal Gathering, Wang Lu had encountered a level 3 monster. That western mammoth, which was more than 10 feet long, was a typical low-rank level 3 monster. That kind of vicious beast could easily flatten an army of 100 people, and even destroy a town of thousands of people. But now, even if Wang Lu encountered it head-on, he would still be calm and fearless. Because that stupid monster's only weapon was its huge body. Even though Wang Lu's strength was less than 1/10,000th of its strength, his copper skin and iron bones were not afraid of it at all. After reaching the 8th layer of sword bone, even that dead fatty's sharp black iron sword could hardly break his defense, not to mention the mammoth's large and inappropriate attack. And among the level 3 monsters, the mammoth was actually quite good at attacking. Most of the level 3 monsters' destructive power couldn't compare to it, but its methods were changeable and hard to guard against. Just now, that invincible golden light had clearly far surpassed the level of a level 3 monster. That kind of invincible golden light was like a flying sword. Not to mention Wang Lu, even if it was a Shudan stage cultivator, he would not dare to take it head-on. And just when Wang Lu was surprised, the second golden light came from the thicket. This time Wang Lu was prepared. Once again he used the winding step to dodge at the last moment. But, without waiting for him to adjust his balance, the third golden light accurately calculated its landing point and aimed straight at him. Damn. There's even a prediction function? And it's even continuous? Wang Lu cursed in his heart. Knowing that he could no longer dodge, he twisted his body in midair, trying to avoid getting hit in his vital organs. At the same time, the sword bone jade pillar in his inner mansion shone brightly, concentrating all of its energy on his sternum. With his current vitality, as long as his vital organs weren't injured, it didn't matter. On the contrary, the opponent's continuous attacks would definitely not last long. But, using his body to taste this abnormal golden light, the risk could be imagined. And at this moment little Ling Er, who saw that something was wrong, also moved. In an instant the young girl displayed an astonishing movement technique. With a tap of her foot, she rushed to Wang Lu's side like lightning. Her left hand grabbed his collar and suddenly pulled him back. At the same time she took another step forward, unexpectedly using her own body to block in front of Wang Lu. Bang! The golden light hit the young girl without any hindrance, producing a dull sound. The strong impact contained in the light pushed her away, causing her to fall into a cluster of flowers. At this time Wang Lu staggered a few steps, regaining his balance. However, when he turned his head, he saw that the young girl was lying in the scattered petals, motionless. In an instant, Wang Lu only felt a buzzing sound in his head, and all of his thoughts were scattered by a strong emotion. In his vision, a mass of blood rose up. In the middle of his forehead, there was a faint golden luster flashing. However, before this strange violent energy could burst out, a scene that made Wang Lu dumbfounded happened. "Tise, your strength is not small," the young girl in the cluster of flowers suddenly smiled and opened her eyes. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, she rose from the ground. The next moment, a series of afterimages of the young girl suddenly appeared in front of Wang Lu's eyes. As he suddenly turned his head, he saw that little Ling Er had already stepped back into the cluster of trees. Her slender right hand was ruthlessly pinching the vital part of a golden snake. "I couldn't tell that you are a beast that has cultivated an inner core. With you here, it is no wonder that a strange creature like the red refined fruit can grow here. With your grade, to be able to cultivate an inner core and even release Dan Qi, it is really not easy. But just now you almost hurt my friend." The young girl's smile suddenly became ferocious. In the next moment, her slender jade-like hand suddenly tightened. Chapter 60. When she threw away that half-dead golden scarlet refined snake, little Ling Er's face showed a dull expression. She didn't have the sense of accomplishment that a mortal martial artist should have when she instantly killed an inner Dantian monster. However, this showed the demeanor of a peerless expert, right? If she cheered with joy, "Oh, I won," that would be too degrading. Wang Lu sighed with emotion in his heart. This time he really didn't hug the wrong thigh. "Sister Ling, as a mortal martial artist, your strength really broke through the sky. Even if the inner Dantian of a snake was only at the initial stage, or even just a pseudo-Dan, its strength was still incomparable to that of an ordinary level 3 monster. Just the aura it emitted had a kind of domineering sword that could break 10,000 methods. Wang Lu's non-phase sword bone could block little thunder and full moon roar, but it couldn't block that golden aura. Let alone a chi cultivating stage cultivator, even a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator couldn't block it. But such a strong cultivator couldn't even last one round under little Ling Er's attack. Then what was little Ling Er's level? High-level foundation establishment stage? Shudan? No, she was definitely just a mortal. Wang Lu was confident that he wouldn't make a mistake. With his void spirit root, he was very sensitive to the surrounding spiritual energy. Whether little Ling Er was breathing spiritual energy or not, he could tell at a glance. When a mortal martial artist's cultivation reached the peak, they could theoretically be comparable to a high-level qi cultivating stage cultivator. Moreover, it was a qi cultivating stage cultivator from an ancient sect, which was quite a high evaluation. However, Wang Lu believed that even in Lingjian school, he couldn't find a cultivator who could resist the golden aura of the inner Dantian. Even if he was an invincible tank in the future when he reached the high-level qi cultivating stage, it was still unknown whether or not he could withstand this attack and come out unscathed. Then what about the lady boss? She found another path at the end of the martial artist's path, and after reaching the seeing God's invincible stage, she simply broke through the void? There were a lot of questions in his heart, but since she didn't say anything, Wang Lu was too lazy to ask. Unfortunately, even if Wang Lu didn't ask, someone else couldn't help it. What happened just now? I clearly saw. Wang Lu directly kicked him. Damn, when you need to do something you don't have time to react, but when you don't have to talk your mouth is quite fast. Wen Bao was confused and his heart was filled with fear. What? The lady boss didn't really mind. Forget it. Since he's like that, don't make things difficult for him. With that, the lady boss turned to look at Wen Bao indifferently. No matter how slow the fatty was, he knew what he had to do at this time. Although he was afraid, he gritted his teeth and said, I'm going to the toilet. Then, like a wisp of smoke, he ran to the far corner and looked at Wang Lu and the lady boss with an innocent and bleak face, looking forward to the end of their private conversation. After Wen Bao left, the lady boss looked at Wang Lu with a smile. To tell you the truth, I've been waiting for you to ask. But for 2 years you actually endured it and didn't open your mouth. Sometimes it really makes me anxious. Actually, I have been waiting for you to ask, but for 2 years you actually didn't say anything. Sometimes it really makes me anxious. Actually, after you entered the mountain, I wanted to tell you the first time I came to the mountain to find you. And you should have questions in your heart, right? Having said that, Wang Lu bluntly said, of course I do. Sister Ling, your existence is so special that even that idiot Wen Bao can see that you're different from others, so how could I not notice it? What do you think? The lady boss asked. Wang Lu said, in the beginning, my intuition told me that you should be the illegitimate daughter of the sect master, right? After all, you come to the mountain when you have nothing to do, and you have unimpeded access to all the forbidden areas. Moreover, you have the firmament cloud ancient coin in your hand, so you are definitely the model of an illegitimate daughter. The lady boss didn't answer, but when she heard Wang Lu's straightforward answer, her eyes were obviously a little confused. After a while she asked, then what happened? You changed your mind? What? Wang Lu spread out his hands, because my master calls you little Ling heir, and she claims that she has a deep sisterly relationship with you. And not long ago she kept saying that she wanted to marry you, so I don't think you are an illegitimate daughter. What does it matter? Little Ling heir was very puzzled. If you are the daughter of the sect master Feng Yin, then if Wang Wu is with you, doesn't that mean that she is 1 generation lower than the sect master? She usually despises the sect master, so how could she be willing to be 1 generation lower than the sect master? It is from this point of reasoning that I reach my conclusion. The lady boss was stunned for a while, then shook her head. You are really a smart person, always like to think more than others, but sometimes you are too smart for your own good. In fact, your guess at the beginning was not wrong. I am indeed the sect master's daughter. What? Wang Lu was really surprised, and he took a few steps back, looking up and down at the pretty and lively girl in front of him. Sister Ling, to be honest, I really can't tell. The lady boss carelessly stroked the hair in front of her forehead. It's right that you can't tell. After all, you are an illegitimate daughter. As for your bitch of a master, you should have thought about it. Her wishful thinking is that if she can get me, she can openly fight for the inheritance of Lingjian school as a son-in-law. Wang Lu finally couldn't help but spit out. Even though he had been with his master for 2 years, she was still able to set a new low. But don't blame her. She has her own reasons for being like this. The lady boss said. Seeing that Wang Lu didn't believe her, she was about to defend him out of sisterhood, but then she heard Wang Lu say, Sister Ling, since your identity is so prominent, why don't you be a little princess in the mountain? Why do you have to run an inn with a daily turnover of more than 10,000 at the foot of the mountain? At the mention of this topic, the lady boss's expression suddenly became cold. Why do you think so? Wang Lu shrugged. It seems that the relationship between you and your daughter is not good. Is it because of your mother? The lady boss said, no, actually, I don't have any impression of my mother. As far as I can remember, he brought me to the Spirit Sword sect. I've never seen my mother, and he never mentioned anything about my mother to me. Therefore, unlike what you guessed, The reason why I don't have a good relationship with him is not because of my mother. Well then why? I think he is actually quite good to you. Good? Are you sure? The lady boss sneered, the dignified daughter of the head of Lingjian school, but doesn't know how to cultivate and only has a mortal body. Why do you think this is? Wang Lu didn't even think about it. Of course it's because a lowly person like you is not fated to cultivate. As a result, a certain lowly person jumped on the spot. Damn. If you want to talk about lowly people, can I be more lowly than your master Wang Wu? She even has the king pill. Being given such an appropriate example, Wang Lu also felt that his answer was inappropriate. Then what's the reason? Isn't it said that the qualification for immortal cultivation is not entirely based on heredity? Like father like son or something like that? The lady boss sneered, then he can use artificial spirit root. With his identity as one of the 7 members of the Hall of Immortal Cultivation in the Wanxian League, is it difficult for him to ask for a few high-grade spirit roots from Shengjing sect? As long as he is willing to open his mouth, Hichu Daoren, in order to show his generosity, I'm afraid he would even give away the incomparably precious innate 12th layer spirit root. Wang Lu pondered for a moment. I don't think sect leader Feng Yin is the kind of person who can't put down his face. Is it because of the school's rules? But I think Lingjian school is actually not that rigidly adhering to the rules. That's what happened in the Immortal Gathering. They were so flexible that people almost thought that their credibility was lacking. The lady boss sighed. Yes, if artificial spirit root is useful, he would definitely find me one and then take me on the road of immortal cultivation. But, speaking of this, have you ever heard that more than 30 years ago Lingjian school once experienced a big crisis? Never heard of it. Because that crisis came and went quickly before it could cause any real damage. It was already eliminated by the Heavenly Sword Hall elders in advance, so not many people know about it. But in fact, that crisis almost destroyed Lingjian school, and the elders didn't have an easy time to deal with it. Is it because the 5th elder returned to the mountain? No, it's just that at that time, I don't know where a 9-tailed fox came from. What, the 9-tailed fox? Isn't that the legendary mythological beast? Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. In the past few days, after taking the time to read about the monsters in 9 regions, he was very clear about the meaning of the 9-tailed fox mentioned by the lady boss. It was a genuine mythological beast that was basically extinct in 9 regions in the past 100 years. Its collection value alone was already immeasurable. If it was made into a specimen, it wouldn't be worse than his void spirit root. Of course, from another point of view, any genuine mythological beast theoretically had a cultivation base close to that of a true immortal. Moreover, these mythological beasts had extraordinary wisdom, long lifespan, and always had some heavenly treasures on them, which were not worse than the magical treasures and spiritual treasures of cultivators. They were completely incomparable to those naked monsters that were raised by the sects in the small clear sky peak. For cultivators, it was almost impossible for them to challenge it. In the glorious era, perhaps a 9-tailed fox could only become an overlord. However, after the end of the Age of Chaos, when the surrounding spiritual energy was greatly weakened, it was enough to shake the entire 9 regions. However, at that time, the Heavenly Sword Hall had no intention to shake the 9 regions. Although they could ask for help from the Wanxian League and gather a group of top cultivators to deal with it, the sect leader decided to use the power of the Lingjian school to eliminate it. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu deeply frowned. Because the sect leader intended to monopolize the loot? No one knows what he was thinking at that time. Even in the Heavenly Sword Hall, most of the people strongly suggested to ask for help, because it was not the time to show off. Even if the Shengjing sect was insufferably arrogant, when they encountered the invasion of a mythological beast, it was impossible for them to fight it alone. It's not that they couldn't beat it, but the loss outweighed the gain. It seems like the sect leader at that time had a wonderful way to quickly kill the mythological beast. Hey, if you want to say he did, he did. Isn't the fact that the magnificent 9-tailed fox didn't even have the time to show off in front of everyone before it was eliminated? The lady boss smiled sarcastically and then asked Wang Lu, have you heard of the celestial cycle god seal? No, I don't understand, but I think it's awesome. Yes, it's one of the top spells in the stellar sword method. Only the sect leader himself is qualified to practice it. Its function is to seal a god. Seal a god? Is that true? It should be true. You've been in the sect for 2 years, so you should know that the founder of the Lingjian school obtained an ancient inheritance. This stellar sword method is one of them. It is said to be a true immortal level method. Although after thousands of years, part of the content has been lost. However, as one of the most important contents in the sword method, the God Seal is naturally a true immortal level spell. It's not surprising that it can seal a mythological beast. The only problem is, can you use a true immortal level spell? Considering that the sect leader was only at the demigod stage and was still a long way from the true immortal level, it was hard to imagine that he could use this spell. Of course he can't use it by himself, but with the help of the sect's treasure, combined with the cloud and mist formation that has been passed down in the Lingjian school for thousands of years, mobilize the spiritual energy of the earth veins, and assisted by the two junior brothers whose cultivation is closest to his, he is qualified to use half of the God Seal. A dignified demigod expert had to go through so much trouble to use half of the spell. With Wang Lu's current cultivation level, it was difficult for him to even imagine the outline of the spell. However, there was no doubt that it was effective in the end. That's right. Even if it's only half, it's enough to kill a mythological beast that has lost its intelligence for some reason. But it's also because it's only half that the God Seal can't completely expel the mythological beast out of the 9 heavens astral winds or a specific mustard seed space. Just by using the power of the spell to suppress the mythological beast's resistance, it's already done its best, so. As the lady boss spoke, the sarcastic smile on her face deepened. So the sect leader designed the next step of the formation. He combined the power of the earth veins of the Lingjian school with the mountain guarding formation, then activated the sacrificial method, using a newborn baby as a sacrifice to create a vacuum point. Then, through the connection between the earth veins and the God Seal, he sealed the 9-tailed celestial fox in that vacuum point. Yes, that's right, as you guessed, that vacuum point is me. The 9-tailed celestial fox has always been sealed in my body. As she spoke, the girl pointed at herself and put on a proud posture. Unfortunately, there was no response. As the only listener, Wang Lu was dumbfounded. His whole body was as still as stone. At first, the lady boss thought it was quite interesting to scare a person like Wang Lu. However, after a while, he still stared at her, which made the girl feel slightly embarrassed. Hey, have you seen enough? Is it that exaggerated? It's just a 9-tailed celestial fox, it's not worth being so surprised, right? Wang Lu came back to his senses, but he still had a look of disbelief. He pointed at the lady boss. Sister Ling, just now you said that happened more than 30 years ago. Yes, what's wrong? In other words, you're already an old woman in her 30s? Before he could finish his words, a pink but particularly powerful fist hit Wang Lu in the middle of his face. Chapter 61. After the lady boss revealed her identity, many mysteries were naturally solved. For example, why was she, a mere mortal world's martial artist, able to break a low-rank magical treasure with her bare hands, send Taoist master of Jindan stage Wang Wu flying, and even withstand the Dan Qi attack of the golden thread red refined snake without being injured? This is a vacuum created by the combination of the Lingjian school's mountain guarding formation and the Blue River region's Feng Qi node. I don't know the specific principle, but anything related to spiritual energy and magical power will be expelled because of the existence of this vacuum, unless its power can surpass the Blue River region's Feng Qi and the mountain guarding formation, and forcibly break the vacuum. But even the 9-tailed celestial fox is far from being able to do this. I'm afraid only a true immortal can try. So, although the golden line scarlet serpent's Dan Qi is strong, it has no power on my body. But as a price, I have no fate with the immortal path, and can only be a mortal martial artist for the rest of my life. After listening to this explanation, Wang Lu was silent for a while, in other words, a fantasy killer. Wang Lu sneered, being sealed with a 9-tailed serpent in the body, gaining the ability to expel all spiritual energy and magical power, making it ineffective. Sure enough, this setting is very interesting. That right fist that almost destroyed my face was also very powerful. Please go to Miss Whirlpool Ling. What nonsense are you talking about? Nothing, it's just a little nostalgia. In short, Sister Ling, I already understand your past. It is indeed complicated and bizarre, it makes one sigh. Sigh, no wonder you hate your father. However, the lady boss was very surprised and seriously retorted, No, I don't hate him. How can I be so narrow-minded? He had no other choice at that time. To be able to protect everyone from the invasion of the divine beast, this is a very great achievement. And the reason why he didn't ask for help from outsiders, I think he must have his own difficulties. What's more, I've been living well all these years except that I can't cultivate, there's no other impact. And thanks to the vacuum effect, I have an extra advantage when facing cultivators. How can I bear a grudge against him? Wang Lu didn't understand. Then why do you have a bad relationship with him? If it were you, would you be happy if someone stuffed an out-of-control divine beast into your body and cut off your immortal fate for the rest of your life, only able to cultivate in the martial arts of the mortal world? I really don't hate him, but I don't like him either. In addition, that old thing often didn't know how to behave. He was stupid and had high myopia, so of course our relationship wasn't good. Whenever I thought about how I was actually his daughter, I felt uncomfortable all over. Just like when you remember that your master is Wang Wu, you will also feel pain in the balls, right? What a good metaphor. Wang Lu exclaimed. The lady boss shrugged and added, actually, it's not just that. That old man is always brooding over what happened more than 30 years ago. Every time he sees me, he looks at me as if I were born prematurely. F***ck, I'm clearly a slender and graceful young lady in the prime of my life, okay? I don't think I'm worse than anyone else. Why do you always treat me like an inferior person? Also, he's an old pervert. Every time we meet, he'll find a way to be intimate with me, saying that he has a deep father-daughter relationship. It's very disgusting, okay? Wang Lu was surprised. I didn't expect the sect leader martial uncle to have an evil father relationship. Sister Ling, you've really suffered all these years. Humph, anyway, I was annoyed to death by him, so I simply went down the mountain a few years ago to open an inn, so that I wouldn't have to see him every day and affect my appetite. Hateful. He even tried to use his authority as the sect leader to force me back to the mountain, but I only stopped when I threatened to break his beloved antiques. Then he unreasonably accused me of not having the ability to run an inn and said that opening an inn would cause me to lose money. More than 2 years ago, I made a bet with him that if I could run the inn well, he wouldn't have to care about me. Then, thanks to your help, that old bastard sulked for a whole month, ha. Wang Lu, I think I can probably understand why there were so many twists and turns in the immortal gathering. After saying so much, the secret that she endured in front of Wang Lu for 2 years was finally revealed. The lady boss's interest was also gone, so she waved her hand and said, well, I've said enough about me, let's continue picking herbs. But first, don't think that I'm omnipotent. I can only nullify spiritual energy and magical power, I can't resolve physical damage. So, if we encounter a monster that fights purely with its physical body, I can't do anything. Wang Lu smiled and said, it doesn't matter, this is already enough. In a sense, after the lady boss revealed the truth about her ability, her value in Wang Lu's eyes increased. This kind of fantasy killer ability, as long as it was used in the right situation, it could really play a miraculous effect. What was the red refined fruit? It was only the beginning of a great journey. Next, in this small clear sky peak, legendary herbs such as wailing ghost vine, flesh lingji, he wanted to pick all of them. Not only did he want to pick all over the small clear sky peak, he could even use the lady boss's vacuum to break through the small clear sky peak and fish in troubled waters. Although there were level 4 or 5 monsters in the large clear sky peak, did Wang Lu need to worry about it? No matter what level of monsters lived in the large clear sky peak, it was still the territory of the Spirit Sword Mountain, the territory of the Spirit Sword sect leader, Feng Yin. As long as he held onto the thigh of the sect leader's illegitimate daughter, Wang Lu didn't believe that he would really encounter any danger. Originally, the reason why he brought the lady boss here for experiential learning was half for the actual combat, and the other half was to amass wealth. But now, it seemed like a big opportunity was right in front of him. However, before Wang Lu could conceive this great experiential learning strategy and dig out all the remaining value of the small clear sky peak, a talisman suddenly lit up in his sleeve and automatically flew out, flashing in front of Wang Lu. Is this the sect's emergency assembly order? The person who receives it must rush to the Spirit Pool Peak as soon as possible? Wang Lu immediately frowned. This emergency assembly was really bad timing. He had just picked the red refined fruit and completed the first step of the experiential learning. He didn't even have the time to carry out the rest of the content. His plan to plunder the small clear sky peak for the 3rd time had just begun, but it was interrupted by this talisman. Regarding this, the lady boss was particularly unhappy. Wang Lu, the team leader, had left, so of course this experiential learning couldn't be played anymore. What's going on? Did the sect leader die? Spirit Sword Mountain, Spirit Pool Peak. Guided by the assembly order, Wang Lu walked through the Heavenly Policy Hall and came to a quiet and elegant small courtyard. When he arrived at the entrance, he saw that the talisman in front of him had already floated into the courtyard. Wang Lu looked up at the wooden plaque on the courtyard's entrance and confirmed the handwriting on it. Spirit Pool House. He couldn't help but be surprised. Wasn't this the place where the sect's middle level and above managers usually had special meals? Because the courtyard was a small red and white building, ordinary people couldn't enter. Thus, the Ichi disciples often jokingly called it the Pink House, and they usually fantasized about the extravagant scene inside. What's more, they even wrote a number of pamphlets, making up the 12 golden hairpins and the like, which were kept in the Pink House for the elders' pleasure, describing all kinds of blood-boiling scenes. Of course, this kind of pamphlet could only be read in private. The Heavenly Policy Hall firmly cracked down on and boycotted this, but naturally it still couldn't be stopped. Among the people who wrote these pamphlets, the two most famous authors, Lu and Wang, were admired by countless male cultivators. Why did they summon me to this place? For what? Could it be that they wanted to invite me, a well-known author, to do some on-the-spot reading? That's not bad. Although he couldn't figure it out, Wang Lu didn't think too much about it. He strode in confidently. Unfortunately, when he entered the courtyard, he discovered that this place was far from what he had expected. Although the building was exquisite and the environment was elegant, it wasn't as extravagant as the rumors said. Not to mention the 12 golden hairpins, there wasn't even a slightly exquisite puppet or mechanical person. The courtyard was filled with a cold atmosphere. This is the legendary Pink House? Tisk, it's really disappointing. I wonder which elder is running this place behind the scenes. It doesn't have the slightest concept of professional management. Instead, it's similar to the Ru family inn in a certain creek town. It's the kind of public enterprise of the sect that doesn't feel the pinch even if it dies. Alas, if I can think of a way to privately contract this place at a low price, that would be great. First, I can release a few avant-garde concepts, then I can conduct an illegal fundraising in the sect and finally take the money. With this thought in mind, under the guidance of the talisman, Wang Lu finally entered the Pink House. There were only 2 or 3 rooms in the building, and the person who summoned him was sitting in the middle of the Pink House, which was also the largest room. Unsurprisingly, it was the several martial uncles of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Only they had the qualifications to summon true disciples at will. Wang Lu steadily walked in front of them, and according to the requirements of the sect, he saluted them one by one. Greetings, sect leader martial uncles, second martial uncles, third martial uncles, and... Wang Lu paused, looking at the cultivator whose entire face was hidden in the hood. May I ask who you are? The several elders laughed in unison, which immediately made Wang Lu feel like he was being teased. Sect leader Feng Yin explained with a smile, Wang Lu, you haven't been in the sect for a long time, and I'm afraid your master doesn't have the patience to teach you much common knowledge about the sect. So it's not strange that you don't recognize him. He is your 7th martial uncle, the 7th elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall, the Peak Master of the Blue Cloud Peak. He has been wandering outside for 3 years and has just returned today. When he came back, he specifically asked to see you, so I summoned you here. 7th martial uncle? Wang Lu was taken aback. No wonder he was urgently summoned back. It turned out that the Peak Master of the Blue Cloud Peak had come to find him. This guy really came back at a bad time, and he didn't come with good intentions. He actually called me in this Pink House. He has ulterior motives. He didn't know whether Sister Ling and Fatty had the ability to pick the red refined fruit, or else the permit he had obtained from Mu Xiao would be wasted. While he was thinking, the 7th elder spoke first. You are 5th martial sister's disciple, the cultivator with the void spirit root who created a miracle 2 years ago, Wang Lu? You really live up to your reputation. You are very similar to 5th martial sister. Wang Lu was immediately unhappy. Who was similar to that shameless master? This martial uncle you have just met, and you are already slandering me. Are you deliberately looking for trouble with me? However, what happened next was very unexpected. The 7th elder's attitude was very enthusiastic. He quickly stood up and circled around Wang Lu twice, repeatedly praising him. You really have a good foundation and you look talented. You are indeed 5th martial sister's true disciple. Then he took out an exquisite jade box from his wide sleeves. Here, take this. This is a cloud harmonizing pill that I refined from immortal glass cloudgrass when I was traveling in the eastern border state. It's not something valuable, but it represents Uncle Master's sincerity. Take it as a greeting gift. Wang Lu was stunned for a moment, thinking that this cloud-melting pill sounded a little familiar, as if he had seen it in a book somewhere. When he tried to recall, he was suddenly shocked. Chapter 2, Section 13 of the 9 Provinces Immortal Cloud Records, Eastern Border States Wanqingshan, Patriarch Peng He, after 53 years of research and experimentation, picked blue cloud grass and refined it into a pill. The one who consumed it could transform into clouds and mist, changing unpredictably. This pill was called Cloud Melting Pill, a second-grade spirit pill. Second-grade spirit pill? This was actually a second-grade spirit pill? This was definitely not something that was worthless. Although it could not be compared to the higher-grade immortal pills, it was still a first-class spirit pill. Any second-grade spirit pill would be worth tens of thousands of spirit stones, not to mention that this cloud-melting pill was famous for its practicality. It would not be surprising if it could be sold for 100,000 spirit stones. The seventh elder actually took it out so casually as a greeting gift? This was really flattering. The problem was there was no love without reason in this world. This was the first time this seventh elder had met him, so why was he so attentive? Casually tipping him 100,000 spirit stones, did he think he was the leader of the Wuxia League? Although the Lingjin school was not a poor sect, the elders were not that rich. While Wang Lu was hesitating, the seventh elder took the initiative and stuffed the jade box into Wang Lu's hand. Take it, no need to be so polite. Fifth senior sister saved my life, and she has been taking care of me for so many years. Her disciple is my disciple. A mere cloud-melting pill is nothing, it can't even repay fifth senior sister's kindness. Sigh, it's a pity that she is not in the sect now. This time when she went out to travel, I did as she asked and brought a lot of souvenirs. But later, I'll have to trouble you to bring them back for her. As he spoke, this mysterious but enthusiastic elder took out a big pile of mustard seed bags from his sleeve. They were of different styles, but all of them were of high quality. Obviously they were all souvenirs from his travel. For a moment, it almost blinded Wang Lu's dog eyes. What was the seventh elder up to? He actually claimed that his master had saved his life, and it seemed that the relationship between them was really close. The martial uncles next to him were not surprised, they just smiled slightly and shook their heads, obviously tacitly agreeing with the seventh elder's enthusiasm. What kind of magical development was this? With her master's character, shouldn't she be the spokesperson of, I have very few friends? She even dared to offend the headmaster and the disciplinary elder, these powerful people, and even made them black for life. How could she have such a generous friend? With endless shock, Wang Lu took the mustard seed bags one by one, then stared at the seventh elder with wide eyes, as if he wanted to see through the shadow cast by the layer of the hood. At this time, the headmaster smiled again. Junior brother, everyone here is one of us, you can also take off your hood. The seventh elder was stunned for a moment, then patted his head. Really, I'm used to wearing it when I'm outside, I'm completely used to it. While speaking, the cultivator pulled down the hood, revealing the mysterious face that was hidden and talking about the old days. Crash, there was a burst of shattering sound. The mustard seed bags in Wang Lu's hands all fell to the ground. This successor disciple, who had experienced too many magical developments and had long trained his ability to remain calm, was finally petrified under the extreme shock. After a long time, Wang Lu slowly opened his mouth. His voice was hoarse and seemed to be extremely difficult. Uncle Black? It turned out that what was hidden under the hood was a dark face. Only the sclera of the eyes and the 2 rows of teeth in the mouth were incomparably white, showing a great contrast. Moreover, his nose was wide, his lips were thick, his hair was curly, and his facial features were completely unlike those of ordinary Nine Regions people. If outsiders were here, they would definitely exclaim, Kunlun slaves of the Western continent? Yes, they were Kunlun slaves from the Western continent. Nowadays, the exchanges between the Nine Regions and the Western continent were getting more and more frequent. In Nine Regions, those blonde and blue-eyed foreigners from the Western continent were no longer uncommon. Some sects even took in foreign cultivators. However, black-haired and black-skinned Kunlun slaves were very rare. As a matter of fact, the Kunlun slaves of the Western continent were not local residents, but slaves brought back by some adventurous Western continent people from the other side of the endless sea. After hundreds of thousands of years, these slaves lived and multiplied in the Western continent. Then, along with the exchange between the two continents, they came to Nine Regions and gradually formed their own ethnic group. However, from the name Kunlun slaves alone, it was not difficult to see that these black people, no matter which continent, had no status to speak of. First, their number was scarce, and second, their level of civilization was far behind. More importantly, the number of people with magical ability was too small. Needless to say, the group of cultivators in the Nine Regions, even after experiencing the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos, the Wuxia League still had an extremely powerful commanding and deterrent force. As for the Western continent, the group of people called magicians and priests could not be underestimated. In the beginning, when the civilizations of the two continents intersected, many fierce battles caused heavy losses to both sides. However, the Kunlun slaves were far behind. According to the experts of the Wuxia League in the Western continent, most of the Kunlun slaves were still stuck in the primitive era. The so-called elders and witch doctors with magical ability used the most primitive witchcraft and witchcraft. Their cultivation system was simple and primitive, far from being comparable to the two continents. What was worse was that, because of their bloodline and culture, it was difficult for these Kunlun slaves to integrate into the cultivation system of the two continents. So far, in the Wuxia League, there were already deity stage cultivators from the Western continent, and there were even many Yuaning stage cultivators. Only the Kunlun slaves, even the number of Taoist Master King Pil could be counted on one hand. Most of them ate some kind of heavenly treasure to be able to advance. Therefore, if the existence of this Kunlun slave, who was one of the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall in the Lingjian school, was known to outsiders, it would certainly cause a great shock. However, it was obvious that whether it was the 7th elder or the Lingjian school, they had no interest in causing a shock in the 9 regions. They were only interested in shocking their own people. Hearing Wang Lu calling him Uncle Black in astonishment, several elders burst into laughter. Only the 7th elder, who was 70% cordial and 30% embarrassed, touched his short curly hair. Hee, I am indeed a bit black, so calling me Uncle Black is not wrong. Later on you can just call me Uncle Black. Previously, 5th senior sister always called me Black Ghost. The disciplinary elder shook his head and said, "How can you be so rude? Junior brother, you are, after all, an elder of the sect. No matter how much you spoil and indulge, you can't break the etiquette." It doesn't matter if Wang Lu blurted it out in astonishment, but later on, you can't call me that incorrectly. The 7th elder somewhat awkwardly scratched his head. Senior brother is right, I understand. At the same time, he secretly winked at Wang Lu as if to say, don't mind that old antique. However, Wang Lu really didn't want to make eye contact with Uncle Black, so he coughed twice and perfunctorily brushed it off. Then his heart was in a mess. It was not because he was nervous, but because the unfolding of the plot contained too much information. Even if he had the quality foundation of a professional adventurer for a while, he still couldn't handle it. This Lingjian school was really a strange sect. Not only did they have 5th elder who broke the 9 regions bottom line and pulled down the Wuxia League style, they even had a black uncle elder? Putting on a show of Little Black's immortal cultivation? What exactly happened to this world? Calm down, calm down. Wang Lu said to himself in his heart. As a professional adventurer, even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, he must remain calm. What was a mere black uncle? There were all kinds of strange things in the world. No matter how strange Black Uncle was, could he be as strange as the existence of his master, Wang Wu? Moreover, this also explained why my master, who was a loner and had very few friends, would have such a good relationship with this simple and honest uncle. Humph, how many women don't like a black uncle? Especially this 7th elder's burly figure, he must be the model of a big tool. While he was thinking, the 7th elder smiled again. By the way, I haven't introduced myself yet. Let's not talk about other identities. My name is Ao Guanhai. I hope we can get along well in the future. Ao Guanhai. Chapter 62. The return of the 7th elder didn't cause any surprise in the sect. For most of the Spirit Sword sect's disciples, the elders going out to wander was nothing new. As an ancient sect, the Lingjian school had always advocated traveling thousands of miles and reading thousands of books. Not only did they encourage the disciples to go out for experiential learning, they also had the same requirement for the elders. As long as there was an opportunity, they might as well go out to wander. In any case, in a sect that was properly managed, it wouldn't be as if it couldn't operate without someone. On the other hand, having someone more wouldn't make people feel uncomfortable. The addition of the 7th elder in the sect didn't have much of an impact on the daily cultivation and lives of the others. In fact, for the common people, the 7th elder of the Lingjian school was a mysterious person. He didn't have a successor disciple, and he rarely went to the 10 Cloud Hall to teach. Almost half of his time was spent wandering outside, and the other half was spent in the clear sky peak looking after the spirit flowers and spirit beasts. Occasionally he would appear in front of people's eyes, but he was wearing a hooded robe, which tightly covered his face. Even some of the senior brothers who had been in the sect for more than 30 years had never seen his true face. Among the 10 great elders of the sect, the 7th elder and the 10th elder are the most mysterious. This was the consensus of the sect. Among them, the 10th elder was rumored to have a big heartache when he was young, so he permanently lived in seclusion in the hidden sword peak. Even the sect leader rarely had the opportunity to meet him. The 7th elder looked after the clear sky peak, but his true face was hidden in his hood, which made him look mysterious. Some people speculated that he was born with a cold and unsociable personality, and some people speculated that he was disfigured when he was young. There were many different theories. As for his identity as a Kunlun slave, except for a few people, no one knew about it. However, those who had truly come into contact with the seventh elder would discover that this outsider clan elder's character was extremely warm and cheerful, even naive and unaffected. His greatest characteristic was undoubtedly his generosity and kindness. If one was to be treated as a friend by him, it would be an extremely fortunate thing. Now, the one who enjoyed this blessing was the non-phase peak's Wang Lu. After Elder Guanhai returned to the mountain, he routinely went back and forth to non-phase peak every day. His purpose was very clear: to wait for fifth sister to come back to give her a big surprise, a warm hug, and of course a lot of greeting gifts. Such sincerity was praiseworthy and lamentable. However, this elder's enthusiasm and persistence, as if he had come to collect a debt, made Wang Lu unable to bear it. This was because this black uncle would come very early every time. As soon as the rooster crowed, he would knock on the door on time. He was even more punctual than Zhou Bapi, forcing Wang Lu to sleep early and wake up early every day. He had originally planned to give himself a long vacation and sleep every day until the sunset. He would live a degenerate life. Because recently there was really nothing else to do. In terms of cultivation, after reaching the 8th layer of the sword bone, before obtaining the 9th layer of the sword bone, Wang Lu basically had no other way to practice. He could only meditate daily, and then absorb the spiritual energy through the sword bone's filtration to accumulate the golden liquid. As for martial arts, the lady boss said that there was no method that was particularly suitable for him to teach. The winding steps and soft cloud sword were already the best choices for the transition period. Although it was not that he couldn't learn a few more high-level martial arts, when Wang Wu came back and taught him the non-phase sword art, these martial arts would soon be covered, and learning them would be a waste. As for experiential learning, it was even more meaningless. The experiential learning challenge of the small clear sky peak has been certified by the Heavenly Sword Hall. After obtaining nearly 3,000 challenge points, the remaining value of the small clear sky peak was almost squeezed dry. As for the elixirs in the Azure Dragon Gorge, last time Little Ling Air and Wen Bao did not disappoint him by picking the red refined fruit. As a result, when they came to the non-phase peak to present the treasure, the victim Ao Guanhai was also there. It was reasonable to say that when Wang Lu brought Little Ling Air, this cheating existence, to the clear sky peak, it was against the sect's rules, especially when he tricked a public official to issue a permit. But naturally, the collection of the red refined fruit could not be said to be justified. But when Ao Guanhai, the victim, saw the red refined fruit, he laughed and without demur, took out the alchemy furnace on the spot, prepared his own auxiliary materials, and refined a box of third-rank elixirs on the spot for Wang Lu. But martial uncle Guanhai treated you like this? Do you have the nerve to go to the clear sky peak to plunder? Do you have the nerve? Wang Lu asked himself, even if his conscience had been polluted by his master's harmful breath for more than 2 years, but he still couldn't do it. Therefore, there was neither a cultivation method to cultivate nor a place to gain experience. In addition to continuing to be a top student in the Teng Cloud Hall, he could only wait for his master to come back. In this regard, Wang Lu himself was helpless, but martial uncle Guanhai was simply distressed. Little Wang Lu, although your aptitude is amazing and your perception is superb, cultivating to become an immortal requires great perseverance. How can you be like this? While reading the popular novel imported from the Spirit Creek town at the foot of the mountain, Wang Lu very suspiciously looked at Uncle Black, who was cooking in the kitchen. He inwardly said, "Every day you waste your precious morning at the non-phase peak to accompany me as my husband. Is that the embodiment of great perseverance?" After a while, martial uncle Guanhai brought out 4 dishes and a soup and put them on the table. He then found 3 sets of chopsticks, one for himself, one for Wang Lu, and one for fifth martial sister. Moreover, according to Wang Lu's request, a black and white portrait was placed next to the chopsticks, which meant that fifth martial sister was with them. While eating lunch, martial uncle Guanhai eagerly asked, "Little Wang Lu, do you have any difficulties in cultivation recently?" "Yes." Wang Lu put down his chopsticks and seriously said, "My master is too stupid, I beg for a refund." Even the optimistic and cheerful black uncle was choked by this sentence and rolled his eyes. Other than that, I have nothing to do." After briefly explaining his own pain in the ass situation, martial uncle Guanhai heaved a long sigh. "I can't believe that at such a young age, You can actually cultivate your body to such a level that you can resist little thunder's lightning strike with your bare hands. And senior sister's new version of non-phase sword bone is even more marvelous. The 8th layer is equivalent to the previous 15th layer. Little Wang Lu, you are actually cultivating the foundation building realm's body refining technique. Moreover, it's the top foundation building realm's body refining technique. Wang Lu blinked his eyes, trying to show a bit of gratitude, but he soon failed. No matter how top the body refining technique, if there's no follow-up, it would be reduced to a eunuch. There's nothing praiseworthy about it. Hearing this, Uncle Black also frowned. Indeed, once senior sister leaves the mountain, I don't know how long it will take for her to come back. It's a good thing that your cultivation progress is faster than she expected, but don't delay it because of this. How about this? If you don't mind, I can help you take a look. Wang Lu was suspicious. Look? Oh. Uncle Black very innocently blinked his eyes. Of course, look inside you. F***ck me, look inside me? Sure enough, Uncle Black's nature hasn't changed. Dream on. No, don't even dream about me, just dream about my master. She is a perfect match for you. Guanhai was even more innocent. Why do I feel like you're thinking about something rude? I'm just using the internal inspection technique to observe your body refining technique. Of course, if you don't want to make it public, then forget it. Just internal inspection technique? Wang Lu nodded hesitantly and made a difficult decision in his life. Martial uncle, please observe. As a peak Yuanying stage elder, Ao Guanhai's internal inspection technique was silent. His eyes had already seen Wang Lu's inner mansion. The more than 200 golden sword bones made him frown slightly. What a pure sword bone technique, worthy of being the cultivation genius favored by senior sister. Oh, the non-phase emperor bone in the sky? It turns out that senior sister's whimsical idea can finally be put into practice. That being the case, I think I can guess the next step. Wang Lu asked, are you going to use the golden liquid as the material to transform the inner mansion? Well, you guessed it wrong. Transforming the inner mansion is the next step. Now, Martial Uncle Guanhai smiled and gave the answer. Your task is to practice the real non-phase sword bone. The real non-phase sword bone? Using this expression, did he want to say that what he was practicing now was a fake product? It's not a fake product, but little Wang Lu, I just want to ask you a simple question. For you, what characteristics should a sword have? Wang Lu said, sharpness, toughness, purity. About these? Yes. Then can the more than 200 sword bones in your body have these characteristics? Wang Lu suddenly gawked. If this standard was used to measure the sword bones. Indeed, the more than 200 jade pillars were indomitable and even pierced through the sky. It stood to reason that they should have sharpness, but after fusing with the outer wall, the tip had long been rounded, and the pillar was smooth and clean, so they had no affinity with the word sharpness. As for toughness, it should take into account both hardness and flexibility. There was no doubt about the hardness of this non-phase sword bone, but its ductility was very doubtful. Who would choose a flexible pillar? The last point of purity was even more problematic. This golden jade pillar seemed to be pure, but how could it allow foreign things to invade it? Right now, the sword bone, as a channel to communicate with the surrounding spiritual energy and the inner mansion, obviously had a hollow structure. So, Martial Uncle Guanhai said, what you practice is just the first part of the non-phase sword bone. Scabbard? What the hell, there's even a scabbard? The real non-phase sword bone, even though it's still mainly focused on defense, it will have all the characteristics of a sword, sharpness, toughness, purity. It's not like this. Moreover, as long as you cultivate a section of the sword bone, your body training stage will be greatly improved. Of course, on the other hand, the cultivation of each section of the sword bone will be quite difficult. This process is likely to continue until you reach the Shudan stage. At least, it's impossible to cultivate more than 200 sword bones in the chi refining stage. It's not that easy. Listening to Uncle Black's endless chatter, Wang Lu could not help but ask, Martial Uncle, are you sure? Martial Uncle Guanhai thought for a moment. Well, although I haven't exchanged cultivation experience with senior sister for several years, I know the design idea of her non-phase sword bone, at least it's not wrong. Therefore, I can also guess the next step of the sword bone cultivation method. How about this, you wait for me for 2 days, I'll prepare a medicine for you. With it, the next step of cultivation will be twice the result with half the effort. After saying that, Martial Uncle Guanhai left without staying for even a moment. And this time he really left for 2 days. During this time he didn't come to disturb his sleep. It was not until the morning of the 3rd day that this foreign race elder, with a pair of swollen red eyes, excitedly knocked on the door. Little Wang Lu, I've refined it. Wang Lu, who had stayed up all night reading novels, had just fallen asleep when he was startled and jumped up. However, when he opened the door and saw the elixir in his martial uncle's hand, all of his grievances disappeared. A round and smooth crystal-clear elixir was quietly lying in his martial uncle's palm, like an amber. However, it contained a surging medicinal efficacy as well as a sharp sword intent. As a void spirit root, Wang Lu could clearly feel it. Even though he didn't have any attainments in alchemy, Wang Lu could still recognize the value of this elixir. Compared to his seventh martial uncle's greeting gift, the harmonious cloud pill, it was a real first-grade elixir. Martial uncle, this is the medicine I need for the next step of cultivation? Guanhai nodded his head. Yes, this is the non-phase sword pill that your master and I jointly developed and designed 60 years ago. It was specially made for sword bone. In the past, every time senior sister refined a section of sword bone, she needed a sword pill to assist her. Those days were really difficult. Fortunately, now it's the 23rd edition, the effect has been greatly improved. This pill's efficacy should be able to support you to refine 5 sections of sword bone, that is, until the foundation building stage. Unfortunately, I don't have all the herbs on hand, otherwise I can refine a few more for you. I can help you smoothly cultivate all the way to the Shudan stage. Guanhai's regretful sigh made Wang Lu shocked. This was a first-grade elixir. Martial uncle, you casually gave me a reward, but you actually feel guilty about it? This kind of spiritual realm was simply like the legendary high-end player, De Li. 3 days later, with the help of martial uncle Guanhai, Wang Lu began the real cultivation of the non-phase sword bone. The non-phase sword bone, at least in the early stages, was not difficult to practice. The difficult part was the fifth elder's exquisite idea and creativity. Now that Ao Guanhai was in charge of the general direction, Wang Lu only needed to do the cultivation step by step, and the rest would come naturally. According to martial uncle Guanhai, the choice of the first section of sword bone was open. Among the 206 sword bones, one could choose any one. Of course, after the choice was made, it would determine the direction of development for a long time in the future. For example, if he chose the skull, then it should strengthen the cultivation of spells. If he chose the arm bone, then naturally, swordsmanship would be the priority. After thinking about it, Wang Lu finally made a decision. He would first practice the finger bone, because the flexibility of the finger was one of the key differences between humans and animals. And the so-called swordsmanship, in fact, the most exquisite changes came from the wrist and the finger. Therefore, under the guidance of martial uncle Guanhai, Wang Lu successfully practiced the non-phase sword bone, middle finger. The success of the middle finger sword bone was indeed like what martial uncle said, the impact was all round. Not only the middle finger had countless wonderful uses, but the entire inner mansion's 206 sword scabbard bones were also sublimated because of the birth of the first sword bone. The specific principle of this, Ao Guanhai was not very clear, but Wang Lu could guess one or two. It was very simple, the balance of yin and yang. Once he understood the relationship between the sword scabbard and the sword bone, then the inner mansion's empty sword scabbard was like a group of resentful women. Now, although the sword bone was only a section, it also made these sword scabbard more or less moisturized, and naturally the effect would increase. In order to celebrate this qualitative breakthrough, Wang Lu personally cooked a few dishes that day, such as scrambled eggs with tomatoes, scrambled eggs with tomatoes, scrambled tomatoes with tomatoes, and scrambled eggs with eggs. He warmly hosted a banquet to entertain martial uncle Guanhai. Fortunately, when martial uncle Guanhai attended the banquet that day, he was very conscious to bring a roasted chicken and a bottle of wine, so that the banquet would not be awkward. In his own words, because every time senior sister invited me to dinner, it was always shallot mixed with tofu, tofu mixed with shallot, shallot mixed with shallot, and tofu mixed with tofu. Wang Lu looked at the red and yellow hot dishes on the table and said in his heart, "Not bad, at least he has more conscience than master." The two of them ate and drank at the table. The wine that Elder Guanhai brought was brewed from immortal grass and immortal fruit, and its alcohol strength was amazing. Moreover, he did not suppress it with his cultivation base. Not long after, he and Wang Lu were both drunk. Of course, the two of them were drunk but not drunk. Because of Elder Guanhai's cultivation base, his primordial spirit was strong, and Wang Lu had never let go of his vigilance against Uncle He, so how could he really get drunk? But even so, the two of them gradually opened up to talk about sex on the table. "Seventh martial uncle, forgive me for being rude, but you have been too good to me during this period of time. You imparted your skills, protected me, and made pills for me. I'm very scared." Martial uncle Guanhai laughed. Senior sister's disciple is my disciple. Moreover, senior sister had specially reminded me to take good care of you in her letter. How could I not take good care of you? Ah. Sai, master was just saying it casually, martial uncle, you don't have to be so serious. In the end, Guanhai became even more serious. He raised his head, as if he was reminiscing about the 100 years of cultivation. Senior sister, she is someone who has helped me a lot. Without senior sister there would be no today's Ao Guanhai. Speaking of which, my name was also given by senior sister. Speaking to this, martial uncle Guanhai gave a silly smile. To tell you the truth, when I was first sold as a slave from the western continent to the 9 regions, it was the founders of the Lingjian school who saved me and gave me freedom. However, it was 5th senior sister's words that gave me the opportunity to embark on the path of immortal cultivation. It was also her who made me throw away my previous name Ao Baba, and changed it to Ao Guanhai. 100 years later, my former companions who were liberated have already died, and only I have Yuanying stage cultivation base. All of this is senior sister's credit, so how could I dare not obey her advice? At this point, Guanhai's dark face unexpectedly showed a trace of holiness and piety. This immediately sobered up Wang Lu a little bit, thinking, adultery, this face definitely has adultery. With master's character, how could she possibly help others to embark on the immortal path and grant them a new life? Trampling on other people's life and worldview is her job, isn't it? Out of this doubt, Wang Lu bluntly said, martial uncle, excluding personal feelings and other factors, if you want to objectively evaluate my master, what kind of person is she? What kind of person is 5th senior sister? Of course she's a good person. You're her disciple, so you should know her very well. I think we're probably not talking about the 5th elder of the same plane? After Wang Lu thought about it, this might be the only explanation. Wang Wu actually had a twin sister named Wang Lu, who was gentle and considerate, elegant and generous, and 100% good person. Regarding Wang Lu's inconceivable words, Ao Guanhai froze for a long time and then patted Wang Lu's shoulder with emotion. Some people and things can only be seen clearly after being in contact with them for a long time. 5th senior sister is a maverick person, but her nature is not bad. Wang Lu naturally could only chuckle at this. This black elder was a kind person, and in the eyes of a kind person, there were only kind things, which was not unusual. But the judgment of a normal person was obviously not so kind. Regarding Wang Lu's incomprehension, Ao Guanhai didn't mind. One day you will understand. Yes, probably only after a long time will you understand. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.